We are talking a whole bunch of stuff today, so we don't have time for a long preamble. We're talking about Bestiary 2. We're breaking it down with Logan Bonner. Logan, hello.
Hello.
I didn't mention this, but Logan, you're the Pathfinder lead designer. That's pretty awesome. Congratulations.
It's true. Yeah, thank you.
How long have you had that title?
Since I think it was early this year. Time has, evaporated around us, so I'm not 100% sure, but it's been a little while yet.
So the Bestiary 2 was something that was kind of predestined to come out. Are you surprised it was this early in Pathfinder 2's second edition's life cycle?
Not really. I think it was either it comes out pretty early or the first Bestiary is this big. So I think we were perfectly happy to kind of have another book come out relatively early. So I think it was about when I expected it to be. Mm-hmm. Like if it had, or at least in the same year, if it had been like a little later this year, or maybe the first book of next year, I wouldn't have been surprised. But I think this is a good time for it.
Mm-hmm. I like comparing and contrasting when Eric Mona would say things like, maybe the first Bestiary will be as big or bigger than the core rulebook. And you look at how the fans are receiving it, and they're like, that would be cool and useful, versus how the designers and developers were working at it are like, are you mad?
Yeah. I mean, also the fans carrying all of it, that's a different story than how it sounds in their head.
I mean, that's true. The other thing we're reviewing today is the Bestiary battle cards and the weight of this thing. So imagine having a 500 page book on top of this gigantic stack of cards.
Yeah.
Oh, and Orgax is on your side. He says he'd rather have two Bestiaries. So when you were designing the first Bestiary, how much were you thinking of the second Bestiary already?
We know the first one is just so essential, and there are so many things we really wanted to make sure we got in there that there were only a few things that we kind of kicked ahead to the Bestiary 2 that felt like they were almost essential, but it was always like we wanted to make sure there was enough new stuff in there. It wasn't just all rehashes for the first Bestiary. But I think most of the Bestiary 2 was kind of a lot more flexible. It wasn't like, well, here's our entire monster list. We're just going to cut this in half and make 2 books out of it. There was, maybe like a third of it that was like, oh, we're pretty sure this stuff is going to be in the second Bestiary. And then the rest was a lot more discretionary.
Yeah, I mean,
now we've said on the show before that Bestiary 2 from first edition was our least favorite of the Bestiaries. No issue with it, just it wasn't as exciting as some of the other ones. Is that a popular opinion? Is that something that's shared at the Paizo office?
I think for us, a lot of it is whenever we're trying to figure out where a monster appeared, it's like that's either in Bestiary 2 or Bestiary 3. We can never quite remember which off the top of our head. So we have a lot of that. And I think part of that depends kind of on like when you started, because a lot of us at this point, didn't start till after Bestiary 2 and 3 were already in the can. And it's like, yeah, I can remember the stuff that's in Bestiary 1 for the most part, because it's like, oh yes, of course, the dragons are in there and the troll is in there. But 2 and 3 are kind of the ones that kind of mush together in my brain. I think both of them are a little hit or miss. Part of that I think is kind of like how they came about, and how it was kind of like, here's some stuff from the APs and here's some stuff from OGL. So it didn't quite have as clear of a concept going in, I think, on some of those.
Yeah, I mean,
so how did that influence the? So go ahead, Bram.
So just to explain for any of our audience why we thought that it was the least exciting was it felt a lot of obligation. It was there were a lot of stuff from the original Monster Manual for 3.5, because Pathfinder was a part of an evolution of 3.5 D&D. And a lot of the things that were in the Bestiary 2 felt like either obligation or pulled out of Adventure Path modules. And it wasn't until Bestiary 3, 4, 5, 6 that we got to saw like the crazy cross-cultural monsters coming in, and really Paizo showing the strength that monster books could have if you were a bit more open to where you drew your inspiration.
So with that in mind, what you were saying about Bestiary 2 and 3 from first edition, how did that influence Bestiary 2 second edition?
I think the stuff that we kind of felt obligated to include was mostly stuff that we introduced in the first Bestiary, but we knew we didn't have enough room to flesh out. That'd be like the psychopomps, where it's like we can fit just enough in here to let you know they exist in the first bestiary, but we know they aren't really going to flourish until they have some more room to grow in the bestiary too. So I think that was those were kind of the holdovers, but most of those are like they're still really exciting because they're cool monsters. We didn't really have a lot of stuff left that was like it's a there were a few that were like the Hippogriff, right? Where it's like it's a utility monster, but it's not super exciting that we knew we needed in there. But most of the book is just kind of like what would be really cool to put in here? What can we have some fun with?
Did the Hippogriff was it in this one? Oh,
Yeah.
Oh,
I believe
that's
it's
funny.
in
Hippogriff
Bestiary.
was a monster I remember not being in the first edition
Mhm.
Bestiary one. I think because it was such a popular monster to summon
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
early Pathfinder and in 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons that it was a more obvious omission. But yeah, this time around, I didn't even notice the Hippogriff didn't make it into the first one.
Yeah. So when
Yeah,
I
and
was
part of that is because there's something similar in the first one. Like there's a griffin, but there's not a hippogriff. You know, uh, there's still something in that slot, just not that exact creature.
Yeah. When I was going through this book, there were really basically like three categories that I kept noticing of how I put the monsters in when I was reading them. And one of those categories was, wait, this wasn't in Bestiary 1? I thought this was already
Yeah.
in Bestiary 1. And this Hippogriff was one of them. Like the Hezrao was another one that I was surprised was I like, wait, I thought it was already in there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing when you have such a huge bench to draw from. There's always going to be some creatures that it's like, wait, what was that? Which one was that in? Was that in one or two? I think there were a few creatures like that. For me, it usually kind of goes the opposite way. It's like I totally forgot this was in Bestiary 1 in first edition. I thought it was in Bestiary 2 or 3 in first edition, but it was in 1.
Yeah.
One of the things that surprised me going through Bestiary 2 is that it's similar to the first edition Bestiary in that it's a lot of the outsiders that didn't make the cut, and so it's like the expanding the planar universe of Pathfinder. And yet, even though I was noticing similarities to the first edition Bestiary 2, I was much more excited flipping through this one than I was with the first edition one. I think it might have been the monsters that came between those, but also some of the ones that made it in. Like, it was cool to see the new version of the Solar and some of the other angels and you know, those dudes that you're not likely to fight, but they make, there we go. The Marut was actually the one I was thinking of. And I like that you went a very different direction from the Marut, which is usually like a big, beefy dude. And now it's more of a elegant, lady.
Yeah.
Oh, we should talk about the art.
Yeah.
How excited are you with the art in Bestiary 2?
Oh, very happy with it. Yeah, there was a lot of cool stuff in there. And I think part of that is also just kind of like we've had so much time to kind of grow the artist base and find new people, and so Sarah really has just a murderer's row of great artists to use for these. It's also been nice that we kind of plan in advance that we're going to do pawn sets, and use the same art for the pawn sets and the cards, which is one reason we ended up being able to do the cards when we did. Is because we already had that art. But that means that for something that has like multiple stat blocks, we also we get more art and we have more to choose from, and kind of that helps art a lot when they're doing layout because they can kind of pick and choose the things that are going to work best with both the text and their favorite pieces, and kind of mix it up in there.
Is there any particularly favorite monster art that comes to mind, or one that you were very giddy about when it came in?
The weird thing is it feels so long ago. I'm like trying to throw myself back to what feels like 1,000 years in the past. I think the ones that were most exciting for me were some of the ones for creatures that I did the design on, because I did a fair amount of freelance on this book. So like the Koldawin was one of mine. It's kind of like a little grumpy fae, kind of like a red cap sailor hybrid. And that was one that's like, I wrote that from scratch, and I wrote the description for it and designed it from scratch. It's cool to see the final version.
So it's funny because I was flipping through this with my daughter earlier, and that was one of the ones where she asked for more information, and I was like, I am not familiar with this monster at all. I can't even sum it up. So can you sum it up for me so that I can explain it to her?
Yeah, so it's kind of like the old man in the sea turned into a fae. So it's cursed to kind of always be trying to catch a fish and never being able to succeed. So it's a little kind of like surly cursing sailor that runs around trying to capture people and take them back to, but always loses them along the way. So it's kind of a almost fairy tale style creature, but with a lot of swearing and a big bone hook.
There are a
You were
lot.
talking about
There are a lot
Okay.
of fae in this book. Was that like
There are,
intentional?
yeah.
Like, hey, we need to have the first world like really represent.
That's partially intentional. One of the things Stephen had in mind when he was kind of picking the monsters for this book was that Kingmaker was coming up, and that's a pretty Fey-heavy adventure path. So we're making sure that a bunch of those Kingmaker monsters were going to be in this book, so that so that would be well supported, and also a lot of them are really popular anyway. So it was good to have them in here anyway. So I think that kind of was one of the reasons there kind of ended up being more of a Fae theme for this book. But we also do kind of like to have some amount of a theme for a given bestiary, just so you can kind of be like, oh right, that's the one that has the Fae in it, or that's the one that has the a bunch of planar monsters in it, or whatever the theme is. So it's a little easier to keep them distinct.
So just go do some of the basic stats for those of you all tuning in. It is a 319-page book with more than 300 individual critters inside of it, which puts it on average slightly longer than your average first edition bestiary, and the bestiary 1 was like a 400-page beastie, so this is a little bit shy of that.
So, what are some of the differences in designing monsters, from your personal opinion, for second edition?
I think the main thing we do is, because we don't have to kind of build it up out of feats and ability modifiers and everything, we kind of we can kind of say like, all right, what does it do, and then how do we design to have it do that? What are the types of scenes we want to see this monster in? How do you interact with it in combat? How do you interact with it socially? How do you interact with it if you're, trying to find it or encountering it in its lair? And then we can kind of use those as the linchpins, and then kind of build everything else around it, which is similar to what you did in first edition. You just kind of had to take a longer path to get there in a lot of cases, and we can be a little more direct in second edition. And we also don't have to worry about things like, this monster should not be very charming, but it needs to have a really high spell DC. So we need to do some kind of weird extra abilities to, give it a +8 racial bonus to its DCs and that kind of stuff. A lot of that we can just kind of like, we don't have to tell you that. It's baked in. And so you can run the monster and not have kind of extra stuff to read that's not really going to matter much when you're using it.
So that brings me to a question I had. This is the first bestiary that's being published after the Game Mastery Guide's monster creation rules were released, and and the first bestiary was probably created while you all were still putting Pathfinder 2 together. So did you all drink your own Kool-Aid for this one? Like, did you all use the monster rules in the Game Mastery Guide when these monsters were created, or was that still not firm enough?
We essentially did that in the first bestiary, because we'd already done the playtest and we were going to convert things. We had design guides for all that from the get-go. So when we changed some of the numbers for the final version of the game, we updated the design guide and then kind of went through every monster and all the new monsters and updated them to that. So one of the things that we also do is the stuff in the Game Mastery Guide is like all you need to get a monster that is going to be great at your table and is going to be really, really good in play. And then for bestiaries, for published stuff, we kind of do some extra steps that for one table to use them are not going to matter almost ever. But once you have thousands of tables using them, then they need to stand up to a different level of scrutiny in some of their stuff. So we kind of have some internal things that go beyond the Game Mastery Guide, but they're really not that useful for a home GM. So we kind of omit those from something like the Game Mastery Guide creation rules. So we kind of use all those as the basis, and like the benchmark numbers are the same. We want our monsters to hit close to those same numbers. There's just a lot more kind of extra detail we go through, and a lot of that kind of happened more in the Bestiary 1 finishing process, and then we use that all the way through for Bestiary 2 and future books and contemporary books and all that.
One of my favorite surprises from the first Bestiary was the sidebars and how they contextualize the monster, and there's a variety of different ways you can do it. So when you are designing monsters, first of all, is it the freelancer that gets to decide what type of content goes in the sidebar, and how could you use the sidebar different from using the main description of the monster?
In Bestiary 2, that is pretty much how it works. We kind of tell the freelancer to do a sidebar. They can do it on whatever topic they want. In Bestiary 1, it was a little different because we kind of initially had a different concept for what those sidebars were going to be. It was a little more like concrete and a little more rulesy. It'd be like, here's some treasure that this monster might have. And in the process, James Jacobs kind of said like, well, let's do this differently and just kind of have fun with these. And the kind of concept expanded out. So we did have that in place for Bestiary 2, though. So we got a lot of these are just kind of all sorts of weird different things that we can get in there. The thing I like about it, those sidebars, is that it can be kind of like whatever catches your fancy, because the rest of the text is going to explain what the monster is and where it comes from and what it does and what its stats are. And this can be literally anything go to town. And I think having that freedom in there makes it so that also reflects back on the rest of the text, because you'll write something for the sidebar and you'll be like, oh wait, that would imply that I need to change this here. And so it's all tied together, but it is something that really can kind of stand out and make it more entertaining to read.
Do you have any sidebars that you found particularly enjoyable to write?
That's a good question. So one of the other parts that I wrote for this was the Serpent Folk. And there's a sidebar in there of the mutations for the Apoth Serpent Folk, aka the Degenerate Serpent Folk. And that kind of stuff is always fun to write. So like an extra vestigial head is one option you can roll up. That's on 238, by the way. So I like doing that kind of stuff where you can kind of put a little seed in there that gives the reader something to play with as they're reading through it.
We actually had a question from Twitter at What Do You Pods asks, they want to hear more about Serpent Folk and scaling them up, as they are converting Serpent Skull AP to second edition. Would like to know good ways to make them a threat even at higher level.
Yeah. I think the main thing is going to be you kind of scale them up like any monster. Look at the guidelines in the Game Mastery Guide. Kind of take, if you're scaling up an existing one that you want to kind of, I still want this to be, a priest. So you take the Bone Prophet and you scale it up. It's pretty straightforward. Like, yeah, I give it higher level spells in the same themes that it has developed in its spells. And raise the stats to what they would be for its new level. Like those are kind of the basics, like the stuff that's relatively obvious from that monster creation system. The main thing that you'll need to look at as you're getting higher in levels is how the action economy is going to work, because there are a lot of things that are a good value at lower levels that stop being a good value at higher levels. For example, one of the main things is kind of movement, because if the PCs all have fly up, you're going to need some type of way to pursue them. And if that's the fly spell, you're going to soak around using that spell. Or a potion of fly, you're going to be soaking actions to drink it before this monster can really get into the fight. So that's the kind of thing you really have to be mindful of at higher levels. And it's also, at a certain point, it's like if you're doing this higher level Serpent Folk and you need it to fly, for example, give it winged boots, right? Give it an item or something so it's got this all the time, or it's gone through some strange ritual. Just kind of enjoy finding ways to make it suit the situation. and don't sweat quite as much for your home game on some of the little details.
Slither on air.
Like for example, you're making a high level spellcaster. You don't need to give it all its first level spells because it's probably not going to be able to cast them. And if it does need to cast them, you'll probably be able to improvise.
Perram, you were saying?
I was saying Slither on air is something I need to see written down at this point. No, I mean, that's actually one of the things I really like about second edition, and the more I've got to play with it as a GM especially, so much so that I'm actually getting more and more eager to go off of the AP track and follow my inner Ryan Costello into a completely custom game for my next group, is that customizing the monsters and making just the monster I need, or to scale up the Serpent Folk example, my initial gut instinct was, well, it's so easy to make a monster in Pathfinder 2nd Edition that the answer really is just look at Serpent Folk, then say I want a 12th level Serpent Folk, and then use the monster creation rules and make a 12th level Serpent Folk. Yeah. And it's not quite, I haven't quite gotten to where I am with Starfinder, where I literally have the monster creation rules just embedded in my back brain to where I can do them between 5-minute coffee breaks. But it's getting closer and closer there. A lot of that is that the second edition PF2 rules are for monster creation is a little bit more deeper than the Starfinder versions.
Yeah,
but it's so versatile that it's just automatic almost. And I can see a lot of examples of how to do it well in a lot of the entries here when you're trying to learn a monster.
Yeah, there's also if you do like the Starfinder style creation, which is kind of more based on the role of the creature. We do have something similar that can be a really good starting point in the Game Mastery Guide, because there is a sidebar that has kind of roadmaps, I think we called them. I'm just trying to find it in my PDF here to make sure I can tell people where to find it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we have like the class roadmaps that are on page 73. So if you're doing an AP, especially, a lot of them have kind of more PC style enemies. You can kind of say like, well, I want this to be a monk serpent folk, so I'm going to look at this monk stuff and use that as a starting point. That kind of thing can give you like a leg up, because it'll kind of tell you which numbers to pick in a kind of like, you'll be picking the numbers off the tables, but it'll be similar to Starfinder in that it's giving you kind of the base chassis of what you can go with. The base roadmaps are on page 59. And those would be like, I want a magical striker, or I want a spellcaster, or I want a soldier, or a brute. And that'll kind of tell you like, take low AC and high spell DC and all that kind of stuff, which can make it just really fast to just, fill in the numbers and go.
Plus, there's the sidebar from the previous page just reminding you can reskin monsters.
Yep, that's also great. Yeah. And especially with something like Serpent Folk, you can kind of say like, I'm going to reskin this monster, and I'm going to grab this poison out of the core rulebook, and that's my monster.
Well, I happen to have it open here on the Frostworm, and the Frostworm, you can easily just make it tropical, give it genius intelligence. Mm-hmm. It's just some kind of giant snake dude that hangs out with Serpent Folk.
Yep.
If you need a gigantic Serpent Folk barbarian, it's just a T-Rex.
There are some good dinosaurs in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think I like reskinning dinosaurs because just their role in their combat abilities is so embedded into my 5-year-old inner child that it just is automatic. Yeah. That's why I'm jumping there almost all the time. I need something that's super tanky but hits like a truck. Oh, that's a Stegosaurus. I mean, right. Yeah. I mean,
I really like the sidebar that came with the dinosaurs, where it's just suggesting you make magical dinosaurs, which is really any kind of magical creature could just be a dinosaur, but you say it's not prehistoric. Right. It's a magical creature.
I know, I'm just imagining the Sailor Scouts, but they're all dinosaurs, and this is already as awesome as it can get.
Yeah. Start taking notes.
People are going to want to hear my thoughts on the froghemoth.
Oh,
before I get to that, what are your thoughts on the froghemoth, Logan?
The froghemoth. I like the froghemoth. There are a lot of those weirdos that I like, as long as we don't put too many of them in a book, right? Like I like the froghemoth. I like the flump. I kind of like the wolf in sheep's clothing, and like as long as there's like 3 or 4 of them in a bestiary, it's all good. Once it starts like creeping up to like a fifth of the monsters, then it's like we want enough that people who like them are gonna seek it out, but not too much to turn off the folks who don't. Because with the bestiary, I think it's pretty easy to kind of like tune out a few that you are not that into, as long as it doesn't get to that point where it just feels like you wasted your money on the book.
Now, there is a line in the sidebar that really kind of captures the weirdness of the froghemoth to me. It says, froghemoths have been known to suddenly abandon an established lair to seek a new home. Fairly clear. But in case you need more information, as if in response to some cosmic conversion or subspace signal imperceptible to other creatures. It's not enough that it's like, here's this weird thing froghemoths do. They'll leave a perfectly good home. Do you know why? They're getting space signals.
It's good to have a reason. I feel like that sidebar is like what would be on like the AM radio show about like, oh, did you hear about the froghemoths? They're getting space signals and leaving their dwellings.
When I first read that, when I was reading this a few days ago, I thought it was just some connection to threefold conspiracy that I didn't get.
Oh. I mean, froghemoth almost feels like what in universe would be a cryptid, because like a Sasquatch to someone that lives on Galarian, it's like, yeah, it's a Sasquatch. The froghemoth is where it's getting weird to even the people that see weird things on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So yeah, the reason that a lot of people want to know my thoughts is froghemoth is kind of a mascot pet monster of mine, and it is someone I go way back with. It is someone that I just picked up some random dungeon companion in high school for Dungeons and Dragons, and the froghemoth was in it. And ever since, I have been fascinated by this creature, and the fact that it was a creature that, because of the OGL, was even viable for Pathfinder, made me that much more fascinated and that much more in love with this thing. And I am very excited to see what I can do with a froghemoth solo encounter. But it's definitely a creature that's got a lot of potential to take on a large group, even by itself.
Yeah, once you get your game up to the right levels, you can spring a froghemoth on them.
So
high priority.
So Pathfinder 2 presents some interesting changes to our assumptions for how the game is played, with the new action economy and stuff. Were there any chances that you all had to sort of mess around with the expected use of monsters in Bestiary 2 monsters? Like, this is a monster that's meant to be by itself versus a party. How do we make that work? Or we really intend this to just be like the background scatter that the Lich has?
Yeah, there's some of that. I think we ended up not doing like a solo elite minion kind of breakdown like you would see in like 4th edition or something. Partially because the way our critical hits work is it means that monsters can actually have a little more flexibility in that regard, because you can do a whole bunch of things of lower level, and because you can crit them easily, you will be killing them faster. But that's just, it already works within the math. You don't kind of have to do a separate mechanic for that. But on the end where you do have things that need to engage a whole party, a lot of that is stuff like making sure that a ground-based monster isn't totally screwed if everybody's flying. So like the Tarrasque, right? It needs things to fight flying creatures. So there's a lot of that kind of thing, which is mostly making sure that its action economy and its special abilities are such that it can take on multiple people at a time. Some of the fun abilities in that realm are stuff like making an attack, even a beater monster, but it can, slam all 4 of its arms on different people at the same time. Stuff that, isn't going to do it a lot of good in a one-on-one fight, but gives it some flexibility. So if you do use it as a solo monster, it's still going to be affecting the whole party rather than just kind of going toe-to-toe with the fighter and full attacking, for lack of a better term.
You were talking about how you only want to fit so many really gonzo monsters in there. I was surprised with how many animals made it into Bestiary 2, and I'm wondering if that's the opposite end, where they're just so normal that you can only fit a certain number of them in there.
Yeah, I think that's true. They are like there's kind of always that mix of utility versus cool factor versus versatility, even for things that aren't like I would call a horse. That's a utility monster. Um, and then there's like a versatile monster would be something that's not like, well, it just kind of needs there for the world to feel normal, but is usable in a lot of different contexts. That would be something like an ogre, right? Where it's like it's not something that the world doesn't feel anything like our world if it's missing, but it also doesn't have like a very specific narrow role. And then something that is more narrow would be like a lot of outsiders, the Grim Reaper, right? Things that are most campaigns are going to not use them at all, or maybe use them once or twice. Um, those are the ones I think are kind of the trickiest, because if you fill the book with too many of those, then it's kind of like, well, if I were running this campaign, I would use this. If I were running that campaign, I would use this. You want enough stuff in there that you can use whenever, that those things still feel like they're special kind of individuals in there. I think that's kind of the hardest part of the mix, is getting the number of those right.
So when I'm going through a bestiary, one of the things I use to judge the quality of a bestiary or an alien archive or a codex is how many campaigns or adventures is this inspiring me to write, just because of how cool it is. It's the Frost Giant on a woolly mammoth mini effect that I have.
Right. Yeah.
Ever since I saw that mini produced, I needed to make that. I needed to make a adventure that used it. And traditionally, Pazos had a good track record there. This one is definitely having me want to make a horrible trip through the First World adventure, especially when I see the wannabe vampire First Worlders. What adventures were you hoping, besides Kingmaker, that these would get to be used for when you were putting this book together?
That's a good question. I think because Stephen did the monster list, I think I didn't really approach it from that direction, because so much of that was kind of already decided. For me, it was more like, what are the individual encounters these are going to inspire, when I was working on the individual monster entries. Because I think, if you're making a monster for your home game, that's when it's like, all right, I know what this is for. I can laser focus it and have it do this one exact thing. When you're doing something for a bestiary, and this is especially true of like the ones I wrote from scratch, is like, okay, how do I make this work in as many different contexts as I reasonably can? Even if it's something that's here to just, kick butt, what does it do when it's not kicking butt, and how can I make scenes that use that? So I think I approach it more from that kind of, like the Deprilu is a good example. That's the one that's just kind of like a big wrestler, and it has a weird mask, and it loves to wrestle. Like, that's the kind of thing that's like, I want these different story hooks here, so that like you can challenge it to a wrestling match, or you can try to pull its mask off and make it sad, or you can you can interact with them in these different ways. You can learn its backstory, or you can just use it kind of as a one-off. I like monsters that kind of work in a lot of different contexts. And when working on other people's, a lot of times they'll be like, well, this seed is here, but they didn't quite, because they were looking at it from a single perspective. They didn't have another person kind of looking at this and like, oh, let's punch up this part and make it so this can be a whole scene you can use this in. So a lot of it is kind of like teasing out some of those details into something that is usable at your game table.
There's one monster that kind of confused and fascinated me, and that's the Petitioner.
Oh yeah.
For a few reasons. One, it's a level 1 monster that's a 2-page spread, which I think might be the only one in both bestiaries. And 2, I could not figure out how to use it in an encounter or in a campaign. So what is the purpose of the Petitioner? Why does it get to be the exception to the low level monster spread?
This is one that is kind of a world building monster that's kind of answering the question of like, all right, what happens to all these people who've gone to the Boneyard? What kind of, if I go to the Boneyard, I'm doing a planar campaign, we visit the Boneyard, who are kind of the normal people there, right? Like, who are the masses? We know that these souls are going there. what becomes of them. So a lot of this is kind of like showing you how to present the kind of the individuals who've gone there for judgment, and showing them off. So that's kind of how those work. There are always a few monsters that are kind of in that spot where it's like, this needs to be here to kind of answer this question and to make the world feel cohesive. Even though you're probably not going to take your first level party to the boneyard and fight 80 of these.
Well, depending on how your first level party's adventures went, they could very much become at least 1d4 of these.
Yeah.
Actually, no. That I just can't stop looking at the face on that one. It just freaked me out, and I was very quick to turn the page.
Luis Loza in chat is pointing out that the giant badger art is terrifying.
It is. And, oh my gosh! It is. I'm pulling it back up. I was like, "Oh, badgers!
It's kind of funny.
What the
that,
heck?"
Like, the regular badger is level 0. The giant badger, that which I assume that's what it represents, is level 2. But if you look at that thing, that might be one of the scariest monsters in the book, just visually speaking.
When I was reading this book,
well, there's that and the hippopotamus are both just like jaws covered in blood.
So when I was reading this book the first time, I just saw Badger, creature 0, and did not notice that giant badger was part of this equation. And I looked down there and I was like, what the world was Stephen spoken? Oh, man.
I'm trying to find the hippo now.
Oh gosh, I have to pull up the hippo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Jagged teeth. That thing is...
Yep. That's more accurate. Ferocious. Hippopotamuses are horrible, deadly creatures.
Sure, they decapitate more humans than any other creature per year, something like that. Some weird
statistic. That's why the base one's level 5.
Oh, but you want to see the exact opposite?
Sure.
It's the
deer sweet monster.
Where's it at? I'm gonna find it. Here it is. The baby rhino.
Baby rhino. I don't see this baby rhino.
I'm sharing it. It's on page 300, Nate.
Oh, actually, I noticed that a lot of animals ended up in the index, and I'm going to presume that's because when you're making the bestiary cards, you're going to need individual art, but animals tended to get doubled up as far as stat blocks.
Yeah, those I think this was just kind of a thing where we didn't have enough text to fill every inch of every page in the back matter, but not. We weren't under enough to, cut 2 pages out of it or anything like that. So I think we just kind of said like, hey, Art, take some of the unused pieces and put them back there and, give folks something to look at as they're looking at creature traits. Mm-hmm. And they liked baby rhinos, I guess.
I noticed that the trolls have again changed their overall art style. First edition had their own trolls. Second edition seemed to introduce a twist to the trolls. And then you have the troll heads in this book. What can you tell me about the new, more aerodynamic trolls?
Aerodynamic?
Not a lot, really. This is one of those things where... I didn't work on the trolls a whole lot, so I don't have a whole lot of detail on. And I don't think I did them for the art order either. Honestly, the art order process for this, I do not remember. This book was one of the ones that was like happening during like the full chaos of the early days of the game, like everything launching, working on doing design passes on AP stuff and all kinds of things. So it was just like. Bestiary 2 is happening somewhere, and I wasn't really working on it in earnest until like the turnovers were coming in for the freelancers, and by that point, a lot of this stuff had already happened. So I don't know.
Had the core rulebook come out, or at least had Bestiary 1 come out by the time Bestiary 2 was being worked on?
I think it had come out by the time we were ordering the text, but It was still like the game mastery guide stuff wasn't together, right? So I think they had some examples they could look at, but I don't think they had, we had to kind of give them whatever we had of that game mastery guide stuff and the design guide, because we hadn't really had a lot of time to like sit down and work on stuff that wasn't the launch for a long time. So I think this one was one where they had a fair amount of information, but it was still like a little rough. There are still some unanswered questions that we've since gotten better shape.
And so there wasn't any feedback from Bestiary 1 that you can pull on for a change in direction for Bestiary 2?
A little bit, but not a whole ton. Yeah. Yeah, the fans hadn't really been using things enough to really have like, oh, well, this is a problem or anything like that. And really, we haven't had much of that in general. Like, we haven't had like, oh, it turns out the numbers are wrong for 18th level or anything like that. So, we're still keeping an eye out for that kind of thing, but so far it's been going fairly smoothly.
I'm just imagining
one of the things that's interesting about how second edition pagination works for monsters is that the stat blocks can be quite varying sizes. Mm-hmm. And so it seems like the more mechanically complex creature loses out on backstory area where you could explain the mechanical complexity. So when you're designing a monster that you know is going to need a big stat block, how can you really make the most of describing what this creature can do and why?
Yeah, I mean, that happened in first edition too. It was just a little more disguised in a lot of places, but you'll see a lot of monsters where it's like, there's this giant stat block, one line of descriptive text and one line of visual description, because one of the things we knew we wanted to get rid of was kind of that visual description, because one, there's a piece of art, and two, it always crunched us somewhere when we were trying to make things fit. Yeah, that's always tricky. The main thing we do is just make sure we've assigned the right number of pages to the creature. Like, if we know it's going to be really long and we know we need to explain a lot about, kind of its place in the world, then we try to do it in 2 pages instead of 1. That is a lot trickier in like especially the first 2 bestiaries than it is in a lot of other places, because once you've kind of those 2 books are so much about like getting as much stuff out there as possible for people to use, that it can be really hard to be like, well, we really want this creature to be 2 pages. So we do that kind of sparingly in those books. But it's a really good technique to use, especially further down the road, is to kind of like give a little more space to them, especially as you get further away from things that like people know what an elephant is and people know what a hippopotamus is. But, when you're doing the Fergalglax Blablog, that is going to be crucial for the entire next season of Pathfinder Society or something, then it's like, okay, we're going to try to give this enough that people can really get down and understand it.
The other odd thing I noticed about spacing is that long and quadrupedic monsters, the art tends to really lean into the stat block, whereas tall creatures really fit nicely into the sidebar. Is that something that you have to now contend with when you're keeping in mind describing a creature?
Sort of, but you can really never tell. It's always one of the parts of the process is like, okay, the art has come in, let's see what has happened, because sometimes it's a quadrupedal creature, but the artist has done it, coming right at you, and so it doesn't take up that much space. And sometimes it's a sea devil who has a spear that is going like this and eating this much text out of your page. So it's pretty unpredictable what you're going to get. So there are a few things that we know, like, okay, this is going to be a problem. We need to compensate for it. And then there's other things that, we just kind of have to take a guess. One of the nice things about the way the sidebars is set up is that we at least kind of know we've set aside this amount of space that we know art is going to go here. In first edition, sometimes it's like, here's this super skinny monster in the middle of 2 columns and it didn't cut any text out. And sometimes it's just, we got nothing to work with. How do we even fit a stat block here?
Yeah, I'm looking at the Ember Fox and I'm like, that whisker probably was like 50 words. But no, yeah, I wanted to ask about the elementals. We saw a bunch of this with the first one. I really wanted to get a chance to ask this. Why are the elementals no longer just size-based blobs?
That was kind of one of the things that came through in early planning of the edition. I think that was Jason's idea, if I remember correctly. I could be misremembering that. I think a lot of it was just to kind of add some more variety, and to kind of say, and it's not impossible to have that same kind of like, it's a guy made of rock, and some of the monsters are kind of like that. But especially if you're going to go do an elemental adventure, we wanted it so is a little easier to imagine kind of an ecology there rather than just like, here are 80 identical fire elementals that are called this really cool evocative name, Major Fire Elemental. We want to kind of have them be a little more diverse. It also probably the biggest factor actually was the art for first edition, because we had like the water shark and stuff like that. So the idea was just like, let's lean into that and kind of make these unique things. It also makes it much easier to kind of say like, okay, well, if it's a shark, then I expect it to behave like this rather than they're all a wave, so we know they're all going to kind of operate basically like this. It puts more variety in your interactions.
Follow-up question. The granite glyptodont, is that the rock elemental nope rope?
Maybe. I think I'm going to have to no comment that one.
Speaking of comments, you probably are not surprised to hear that the Fergal Black's Blug is he really blew up in chat. There's immediate speculation on it. Luis is upset that you spoiled it.
Oh, sorry.
So if you're looking for proper spelling,
the release
we
date
can copy and paste it from the Twitch chat for you, because obviously this is a creature with a lot of traction.
All right.
I mean, 40 legs will give it a lot of traction.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said 40 legs gives it a lot of traction.
Well, it'll be on the cover of the next big product.
Oh, don't make me dream, Sheppy. He says fan art incoming.
Oh, Perram, you must have been happy with the selection of oozes in this book.
I really was. There's a few oozes here that always makes me happy when oozes don't get ignored. And my favorite is, of course, the carnivorous. The carnivorous blob, because sometimes you need a B movie to invade your campaign, and this will do the job nicely.
Yeah, and it has really cool art too. The kind of city crushing, salmon-colored mass.
So the gray ooze and the verduous oobs are definitely ones that are going to be super usable in my campaigns, because that's kind of like my sweet spot for the oozes. We got these really interesting, we really don't want to get touched by it monsters, and carnivorous blob. I might not ever get to use it much, but they're going to remember the time it shows up.
Yeah, you're just glad it's there. It's also one of the nice things about kind of some of the bigger entries is you can have some nice, utility stuff, kind of nice, use again and again, and there's usually enough room that you can do something really weird too, like that carnivorous blob.
I do like,
or in the first bestiary, like the skeletons with a bunch of nice, basic, useful skeletons, and then a whole bunch of abilities like skeletons throwing their heads at people that you can just kind of slap in there.
When it comes to creatures where kind of the creature type is limited in concept, such as ooze, how do you flesh out the different types of ooze and different types of creature within that concept?
So I think for something like an ooze is very, very narrow, right? It's probably the narrowest kind of main type we have. If not, it's
that or plants.
Certainly up there. The intelligence factor is always a little different too, because the oozes have such a plants can kind of branch out into treant style, more intelligent ones, and oozes ones are typically a little, we'll say less bright than some of those other categories can get. I think the thing is, especially with oozes, we kind of designed them to be, to have crap AC and to have this very specific experience of, I'm wailing away on them, and it is just a blob of pudding that will not die, right? So I think they have like this extra incentive to kind of stick to that concept, and if they stray too far from that, they kind of fall apart. So I think the main thing is like making sure they're still fulfilling that role, and then thinking of ways that you can fulfill that role but do something interesting with it. So and they had a great starting spot, right? There are ones that split. There's the gelatinous cube that is, transparent. You just walk right into it. So thinking about things where it's like, it's kind of dumb, it's very tough. What are ways I could make this, a situation that you engage with in a different way from all the other ones? So, you have the one that is, it looks like water and it loves sitting in wells, right? And it can throw water buckets from the well at you and that kind of stuff, right? You kind of think of the different places these could live, different ways you can engage with them, and then kind of find little niches for them that are just a little slightly off from the other ones you already have.
Sorry, just reading in chat. The Himbo Ooze is suggested by Dungeon Novice. Very dumb, kind of tough. Perram, do you have any final thoughts on the Bestiary 2?
I want to say that I really enjoyed using the Bestiary 2 as sort of also a sneak test of how well PF2 was doing in its new monster rules. Because I intentionally blind substituted in a few of these monsters in my Age of Ashes game. And I did that so that it would be like, first, I wanted something that they would not have been super familiar with. And secondly, because I wanted to see how quickly I could absolutely just blind read a monster and run it as is. And I have to say, I was very happy with how that works, because it was simply of, look at the new stat block, go down to the special abilities. That's where they wanted me to pay attention. That I'll try to make sure this monster gets to do its special ability, and then the players will remember it.
Yeah, one of the things we really tried to do when kind of rethinking how we did monsters was make sure that there wasn't a lot of stuff in that stat block that you were going to read but not be able to use or not know how to use right away. So a lot of that is like monsters that had a bunch of spell-like abilities in first edition, right? We would look at all those and kind of say like, all right, which of these are really it's bread and butter ones that it's going to use over and over again, and which are the ones that it's going to need for its story, and then let's look at what's left and see whether we still need it. So a lot of that is just kind of about kind of prioritizing your time to make sure that we aren't, having you read a list of 8 feats, one of which does anything during the session. So I'm glad that is working out for you.
I will also say
I am really impressed with the monster selection in Bestiary 2, because like I was saying earlier, it does have a lot of the fill in the gaps from Bestiary 1, but then it also feels like there's a lot of monsters here that may not be like first stringers, but they're ones that I have I'm familiar with, I have fond memories of from a memorable encounter, and a lot of them that I really was surprised, like Perram was saying, weren't in Bestiary 1, like the Shocker Lizard was one of them, the Choker, the Athach, Assassin Vine. So flipping through this, there was like a sense of familiarity that was really comforting. And it was also a lot of exciting creatures and the occasional new one. You brought up a couple of them, the like the giant wrestler dude. I think this really is going to be a memorable Bestiary 2, even as more of them, even as more Bestiaries come out as the game, goes on over the years.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is because of something Logan said earlier. There's where we get like a general broad category, and that happened more so in this Bestiary than I think even the first Bestiary, where there would be, okay, that's the ones we expected, and then here's some fun ones we get to sneak in the back door, and that's a lot of those fun extra ones are the ones that got me the most excited to try to put encounters together or substitute encounters in adventure paths with the most.
Logan, what do you hope
some
people?
of that?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the trolls have that because there's like a bunch of, there's like the Jotun troll, the 2-headed troll, and some of that. And then there's like the troll hound is also in this book if you want, a pet for your trolls. So there's like, oh, here's this concept, and now here's enough to kind of do some extra weird things with it.
What do you hope people take away from Bestiary 2?
I don't know if there's like a global lesson to be learned from Bestiary 2. I hope that they, like you said, I hope they're reading through it and they, what Perram is saying, they get an idea for their campaign, or they get an idea for like, oh, the next arc of my campaign can be all about this Bricolacus, or can be, there's a scythe tree that they're going to rest at, and not realize it's a scythe tree, that kind of stuff. I like the I want people to be inspired by it and just kind of find the perfect spot for all these weird things in their game.
Oh, there was one thing that I've been meaning to bring up in a bestiary review, and I keep forgetting. In first edition, there were all the icons about the environment and things like that, and that was removed from the second edition creatures. And it was something that I never used in first edition, and it was something that I would only remember about when I got to the index at the beginning of it. So I just want to kind of see if you have any reflection on that, on what its original purpose was, why you don't think it was successful for me, and why it was removed for second edition.
Yeah, we removed it for exactly that reason. Just like nobody said they used them, and they were kind of a pain when we were working on it, especially like, there were, boy, I don't know if I even remember how we set them up anymore. There's the type, the environment, and then the like climate, and the type was always very straightforward, and that went in there, but you can also read that elsewhere in the stat block. You can read all of it elsewhere in the stat block. And then the other two, there were just enough weird things where it's like, is this ruins, or is this, this lives, environment any? Well, we just have to pick a symbol for it, right? So it just kind of felt like we were doing work that wasn't really helping anybody and wasn't that rewarding for us either. So we just kind of said like, all right, let's not do this. I think it was mostly there to kind of add another kind of art element, another kind of piece of visual interest. But I think once you get enough symbols that you're in the same number of symbols as are in here, you can't really remember all of them off the top of your head anymore, and they kind of cease to be useful. And they don't give you the full picture, so I think they just weren't really doing their job.
So, Logan, I think we're about ready to wrap up on Bestiary 2. I'm very happy with it. Perram, how happy are you with it?
I'm very happy with this. I am already eager to get my players back in person when that becomes safe again, and now very desperately hoping a Bestiary 2 card box happens sooner than later.
I'm pretty sure it's already been announced.
No, but I want it now.
Okay, well, you have to wait. The card box, you don't have to wait for.
Box, just release it. Just give it to us.
Yeah, no, this is the pawn problem where I would often get really cool bestiaries and then have to wait for the pawn set so I could use them. And if I make a habit of using pawns, there's a topic we're going to talk about soon.
Logan, what did you have to do with the Bestiary battle cards, by the way?
I don't think I did much on those. They were, I thought they were a good idea. I think that's about it.
Okay, fair enough. So then, before we go into the review there, I guess it's a good time to say goodbye to you. Where can people find you online, and is there anything you would like to bring attention to?
The best place to find me is on Twitter. I'm at Logan Bonner. I'm also on Instagram at Logan Bonner RPG, but I don't post there very often. Something I'd bring folks' attention to is the Humble Bundle that's going on right now. The Bundle for Racial Justice, which includes the Starfinder Core Rulebook PDF, a whole bunch of cool novels and video games that are not by Paizo, but there's some very cool stuff in there I recommend folks check out.
Which reminds me, I think there's actually a couple of people put up their free PDF of the core rulebook into our Discord. So if you go to Starfinder, the Starfinder channel on the No Direction Discord, you might be able to grab somebody's extra Starfinder core rulebook download code. Act now, because now that I've mentioned it, I'm sure that some people that are watching it live are going to go there right now. Mm-hmm. So thanks, Logan. This was fun. This was good insight into what goes into a second edition monster, second edition bestiary, and just thanks for everything you did, making Bestiary 2 a monster book with a lot more personality than I was expecting.
For sure. And now I regret that we didn't call it the Bestiary Secondary. I feel like we should have. That should have been the title.
That makes it sound inferior.
Too late.
All right, cool. Take it easy, Logan. We're gonna disconnect you from the call, and then we're going to come back for the review. We don't normally do 2 reviews in the same episode, but between PaizoCon taking up a lot of the last couple of episodes and a lot of cool stuff coming out in that time, we really needed to pack a couple of reviews in. So that's why I hope people didn't find the Bestiary 2 one was a little rushed, because that interview was a little shorter than our usual interviews. But it's also a Bestiary review, which is usually a shorter review than most of the other hardcovers. But the other part of this review is the Bestiary battle cards.
You can't hold it.
An absolute brick of a product. It weighs this as much as, I'm going to estimate 5 Bestiaries at least. I feel it. I feel it every time I pick it up. I have to make effort.
I was so happy when we got a review copy in of this, and I'm like, oh, it's in finally, and I picked up the box, and I'm like, crap!
Well, the review items that I was expecting came in like 5 different shipments for some reason, and so this was in the first one, and I just assumed it was the whole thing. I was not expecting any one product to weigh this much.
I have an audio demonstration for our audience. Okay, I don't know if they heard that.
Was that were you grunting?
I dropped it on the table hard. I did
not hear that at all.
My sound setup. Oh, they heard it.
Being heard
they
it.
Totally heard it.
Then how come I didn't hear it? Anyway. So, the Bestiary cards. Perram, why don't you sum these up? You are known for your cards and accessories.
So, the basic idea is simple, but also brilliant. You have a rather large, not quite tarot-sized card that
not
has...
Not quite tarot-sized?
They're not. These are wider than your traditional tarot card. These are index card-sized. These are, I'm not sure, these 3.5 by 3 by 5s, maybe. I don't know. I would have to measure it, but these are... Oh, I have a measuring mat right here. I can slam it down and tell you. It is exactly a 4 by 6 card. Whereas a tarot card is usually a little bit narrower than this. And it is the stats for the monster on one side, and it has the art for the monster on the other side, which makes it super useful as a GM prop to be able to go. And then you all run into the room where a weird spinny orb with wings attacks you, which is the Arbiter Aeon. And I don't know what you did to tick off an Arbiter Aeon. Probably like put your library book on the wrong shelf or something. But it's a great little reference card that gets the job done, and it's simplistic, it's wonderful. I love every bit of the concept, and it's led me into my complaint earlier. That was just a complaint of, I don't want a Bestiary to launch in the future that doesn't drop this at the same day.
So this was actually going to be one of my closing points, but with Bestiary battle cards, do we need Bestiary books?
Oh, so I don't know. I don't know. I think that this is a great solution for a very particular type of player, but I don't know if this is the solution for every type of player. There's some hauling this around in its entirety is definitely not as easy as hauling around the book or storing it. There are so many logistical issues with this product that I think is worth it at the end of the day, but definitely not a book replacement. Now, that said, I would very much be in love with Pathfinder if they adopted the first printing 2nd edition monster manual style monsters, where they were provided as 3-ring binder pre-punched pages that you put into an ever-expanding 3-ring notebook.
Chet has a couple of points about why the book, the advantage that the books has that the cards do not. Ecology isn't on the cards as Dungeon Office. This is true. This is just the stat block. There is no information about who these monsters are. You don't get the sidebars. You're only getting the mechanics. And Kitsune Warlock says books let you reference specific monster abilities. That's true too. So even though it's just the stats, it is just the stats as they are presented in the Bestiary. So if it is a monster with a universal monster rule that shows up in the index, that rule is not reprinted on the card. So you do still need to reference into the Bestiary, although a lot of that stuff you can find on the Archives of Nethys pretty easily. In fact, when I was using these cards in a game after PaizoCon, I didn't have my Bestiary handy. I had the cards and I had the Archives of Nethys, and my test was to see if that's all I actually needed to run these. And yes, for that encounter, which I was hoping was going to be a number of encounters because that's what I prepped for, because I was able to prep for a bunch of encounters pretty quickly using these cards. That was all I needed as far as to actually get a feel for the monster. I do still think the bestiary as it's presented is a complement for these cards, but it's close.
Mm-hmm.
These are almost a bestiary replacer.
Yeah. I could see somebody just relying on Nethys or some other format for the bigger stats and then using these as the ones that they actually plop down the cash for. That's an easy thing to see. I personally enjoy the world where I have both. I don't see but I can totally see why you wouldn't. I mean, because for years, this is kind of how I've been GMing anyway, not with cards, but I don't usually go to an away game, especially a Pathfinder Society game, hauling around all my bestiaries. I print out the stat blocks of the monsters I intend to use, and I have those handy for reference. This just skips out the part where I print them out. And, also the cool full color art on the reverse side is majorly handy. And Kitsune Wordlock is saying something, a tip that I was going to bring up, I have brought up in the past, is that you can affix these to the top of your GM screen. And that's a great way to reference the stats of the monsters and let the player see the art of the monsters you're using. You're using a card thingy.
Yeah, I got this from Dogmite.
Mm-hmm.
It is a card holder. I use it for face cards, and even better than that, because I don't really need to reference the back of the face cards, but this, the way it's designed is that I can have the monster facing the players, and I can just poke it so that it's at an angle so that I can see the stats that I need to.
So it's
just a simple card holder, and I can fit 3 or 4 of these cards onto there, depending on how they hang off the edge.
So the other thing I would totally recommend is if you have any sort of pawn bases and you have a few spare, and if you have any sort of pawn bases and you've bought a few pawn sets, you have way more pawn bases than you'll ever use. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little black pawn bases. So one of the things I'd like to do just with the pawns themselves is I would glue 2 of the pawn bases together on the undersides so that one would clip to the top of my screen, and then I could put pictures of stuff on top. That's what I did with some face cards, and it works just fine with these cards as well. So you put, and then you can clip it to the top of the screen and then put the card in on the top of the groove, and it will hold it there. There are other solutions using clips and card protectors and wedding invitation holders that I told you about earlier for cool effects. Anything that can hold a card upright, super useful.
Lava Being is asking if there are any cards besides monsters in the box, as in like reference cards, Universal Monster Rules cards.
No.
I believe the only thing in there is the OGL card, correct?
I didn't even see the OGL card, but I'm sure it's in here. Actually, I'm not sure it's in here.
Oh. All right. Oh, no, the OGL is printed on the box.
Yeah. So yeah, there's no OGL card.
There's the OGL.
It is all critter. It is all critter all the time.
450 cards, which comes to a little more than 400 monsters, because a couple of the higher level creatures, specifically the dragons, take up more than 1 card to explain their entire stat block. For the most part, though, it's 1 card per monster, and everything about that monster is on that card, except for the stuff we already talked about earlier.
Yeah, and I like the fact that they are the bigger sized cards. I love cards. Everybody knows I love cards. I love card-based solutions for role-playing problems. And these bigger cards means that you can actually fit decently complex stat blocks on them without making the text so tiny you can't read it, or having to make your own custom solutions where you use symbols and glyphography to summarize rules, and then you have to memorize stuff, or you end up going back to the problem that first edition monsters, and this goes all the way back to 3rd edition D&D did, where it would just like reference feats and abilities that did not explain themselves or call themselves out. And then how good is a reference card if you have to also then have a book to you look stuff up at?
So I do want to touch up on what you're saying about the size of the card and the readability of the cards, because when we were talking about the condition cards, one of my strikes against it was these cards are harder to read than I think they should be. And we, in that box of items to review, one of the other things we got was the new item cards. And again, I am having readability issues with the size of the font and the contrast with the background. It could be that I'm getting older, but I really do think that these cards are not as readable as the other ones. Those specific, like the condition and the item cards are not as readable as previous incarnations of them. However, the bestiary cards are perfectly clear. I never had trouble reading it. Everything seemed clear. I did have a little trouble finding specific details because even though we've been calling these reference cards, it is still the full rule. And so if it's a rule with a lot of flowery language to the description of it, that flowery language is still in there.
Right. Yeah. So like you will not have to pull out the bestiary or rule book to see how something works. This has the full text on how to run the monster ability.
Well, I mean, there's still some things. There's multi-tiered monster abilities where it's like something like poison, where here's the poison stat block, but you still need to know or reference how a poison stat block works because it's not. The poison rules aren't on there, just the poison stat block are. But that's very specific abilities that are not self-explanatory. The ones that needed an entire stat block just to be consistent. So I was talking about how I prepped really quickly. So I had an idea of just, here's a smorgasbord of encounters you could potentially run. I want one with like a whole bunch of low CR monsters that are, certain difficulty based on what the Game Monster Guide says. Here I want just 2 monsters that are fairly significant. Here I want some solo monsters. And using the Game Mastery Guide's encounter design chart, using the index in the bestiary where monsters are listed by CR, using a random dice generator so that I could roll randomly the monsters on that chart and the cards, I was able to put together a dozen encounters in half an hour. And so that was just kind of conceptually coming up with them. Then it would take some time to read over the cards and refamiliarize myself with how the monsters work. But ultimately, using these cards to design encounters, and I can imagine writing an entire adventure where you're just like, oh, what's a monster I haven't used in a while? You just flip through the art side of it, almost like you're looking through baseball cards.
Yeah, I was just
until you find something that's like, this is interesting. Boom, that's going in my adventure next.
Yeah, because like how I've been storing it, and this is going to get to a point that like the one criticism I have with the product, but like how I've been storing it is to I just use the 2 columns with them stood up like this so I can quickly flip through to them alphabetically and get what I want. And then I found myself when I was just sort of goofing off and trying to look for cool monsters to talk about for today's review episode, I just turned it around and just started flipping through the art till I found something cool, like you just said. But that brings me to my one criticism of this product is that the cards themselves are near perfect. I mean, I have very little criticism that I have about the cards themselves. I like that they're big. I like the cool art. I understand the compromise needed to be made where some of the monsters take up multiple cards. I know that because of experience trying to fit Pathfinder rules on the cards. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just can't. But all that said, the box they came in is like not great at all. It fits the cards so perfectly tight in such a weird orientation that I'm curious as to why this was the choice, because it ships with all the cards flat on their backs in 2 columns facing up at the box lid. So but if you tip the cards up on either of their ends, you can't close the box lid anymore. Not fully. So ideally, when you have a lot of cards that you need to reference through, you want to be able to easily flip through with them vertically so you can see the titles of what you're trying to get to, which is why I have them stored in the box like this.
I really like the way they're stored in your box, by the way, and I 100% plan on storing mine like that.
Yeah. But this way, I can't put the lid on the box. Like, I can, but it won't close right. It's going to squish the cards. It's going to damage the cards. No,
but you can put it upside down and just leave it open, right? Oh, I guess you're talking about for transport?
Yeah, because like I'm going to have to put these on a shelf and stuff. And eventually, there's going to be Bestiary 2 box. There's going to be a Bestiary 3 box. There's going to be the Ridiculous Monsters Redeemed because James Jacobs got bored this weekend box. None of these are confirmation that these are actually going to exist. But I'm going to have a lot of these, and I'm going to have to find some way of keeping them on my game shelf. And as I've just reorganized my box, my office, those of you may notice that I'm using the backdrop right now. It's because I've torn
Hello,
my
backdrop.
Huh?
I said hello, backdrop.
Yes.
It was nonsense. Continue.
Yes. It is because I have just recently been reorganizing the game room / podcast studio, and behind this backdrop, it is shielding you from the unholy mess that is all of my shelves emptied on top of my game table while I'm trying to reorganize everything. And so I've become acutely aware of how things need to be stored to keep them safe in a role-playing game collection. This box does not let you do that, because in either direction, their cards are too tall for the box to be closed, either on their side or vertically. Forget about putting them in sleeves. There's not even room for me to make dividers and then let them lean back again, because then the dividers will damage the cards. This box, I will not be able to use for long-term storage. I'm going to have to come up with another way.
Now, I do want to defend the box in that it is a sturdy box, because we keep talking about how heavy this product is. I don't think this box is going to fall apart. It's just the practicality of how it's presented. Like, again, talking about how heavy things are. If I put my thumb down and just try to dump out the cards that are on this one side, that is not only a heavy stack, but that is 200 plus cards that I am hoping to grasp in my hand that's this thick. And so it's a mess waiting to happen. And because it's an unusual size for a gaming product, you're not likely to be able to go into your game store and just be like, I need a storage device, a storage accessory for this product. It doesn't quite exist yet. I've seen some recommendations for things from craft stores, but as far as something that you could expect to find at the game store next to the Bestiary Battle Box, not that I know of yet.
Also, like, if you remember our very first Mike Selinker interview, when we talked to him about the Pathfinder adventure card game, and then there was this like giddy 20-minute talk where he was like, and then we got all the Legos and we put the box together and we made sure, how's it going to fit with all the expansions in there? And like, they were so proud of making that box. I can't say that about this box, or I really can't.
Right. And the other thing about that box is that there was a whole bunch of extra space for the multiple editions. I can't picture them making one gigantic box for all future Bestiary battle cards to be stored together, because it would weigh so much.
No, that's exactly what somebody needs to do. Somebody needs to make the Pathfinder Bestiary card case thingy.
The best Bestiary battle cards box.
Yes, that's designed specifically to fit sleeved cards with dividers so that you can just, like, in a long trough, because that's ultimately what this is going to need. It is going to need some sort of third-party solution to protect them, because if I'm going to have to keep taking them out, putting them back on their backs, taking them out of their backs, putting them vertically every time I use them, I'm going to put so much wear and tear on these cards, and especially since they will not fit with sleeves into this very tight formation, that's going to be a problem. That said, all this complaining I made about the box itself is completely irrelevant. I think everybody who plays second edition that likes to use physical references for anything and can afford them should go get these cards, because they're just wonderful.
So a couple of last points on my part. First of all, you said a third party would have to do it. Now, are you familiar with the board game? Well, it's a card game, Smash Up.
Yes, I love to play Smash Up.
So Smash Up is constantly putting out new decks, and it's a game that every expansion really adds to the game. And so eventually AEG just put out a gigantic, nearly empty box that you could buy if you've got all the expansions, and it stores them all. So it is potentially something Paizo could do. They could make that box look very pretty. It could be multifunctional, because if you just want a pretty box and you've got some other thing, like let's say you print out all your PDFs and you just want somewhere to store all your loose papers, but it could be made with the Bestiary battle cards in mind. And you could even include a bonus Bestiary battle card of like that box, but as a mimic or something like that, just to make it a little bit more fun.
Yeah, I remember there's another one, the biggest
Cards
blackest box is the one I'm thinking of, that did something very similar.
Another example, yes.
And Paizo did a very fantastic adventure card game special edition box that was released last PaizoCon that I very much regret not grabbing instantly.
So I think there is potential that we get such a box from Paizo, although it would be a few years down the line because I expect we're going to get a Bestiary year, and so we'll get a Bestiary card probably 6 months after that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is going to be such a successful product because I have the same glowing endorsement as you do. This was an amazing product that really made my game run faster, made prepping for adventures run faster, made design. Like I'm thinking of more and more ways that I can use this product, and that's exciting.
I'm going to put a call out to our audience. If you are using this product or you want to use this product and you have seen cool ideas or have cool ideas on how to store, reference, and protect these cards because of their odd shape, we want to hear about them. Put them in the comments of this video if you're watching on YouTube, put it in our Discord if you're there, Facebook if you're there, wherever you see this video posted or this podcast posted. Leave us a comment if you've got any cool ideas for how to store these things. I will be collecting those as you do so, and the next time we do an episode, I will take some of the best suggestions and put them out there and give you all kudos for the cool ideas.
So let's say Trident B asked if you can put an Evening's Monsters in a photo album. I think that is a great solution. If you just have your photo album for travel, your Bestiary box for storage, that is a really cool way of handling that. And you, yes, absolutely could fit an entire adventure's worth of monsters into a photo album.
Yeah. And I saw somebody else said that there's special boxes that you can store that are designed for 4x6 photos, which is, actually probably dead on for what we need here.
Perram, I think we did it. I think we packed 2 reviews into an episode that also has a whole bunch of news that we have to get to.
I forgot about the news.
So we'll be right back with the Pathfinder news right after this.
Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news. Pathfinder news.
And we're back.
All right, Perram, I know we said we were going into the news, but just as we were transitioning off, Dom in chat said, put in a treasure chest with the Pathfinder logo on it. And it made me realize Dogmite has the Pathfinder license for wooden accessories. And I have a feeling that they could do something really cool with this. Really expensive, but really cool.
I've been looking at some of those Dogmat ones. Have you seen the new screens, the little player boxes they put out with like the clear acrylic stuff with like a character sheet printed on it?
Yeah, I've thought about getting one for Xavier.
Yeah. And the cool part is they will let you send them art and they will scrap that on there for you. So it doesn't even have to be a pre-made one. You can, if you have an artist friend that does layout design, I don't know where you'll find one, Ryan. You have a few billion friends, I think, that can handle this.
Yes.
You could have a Xavier specific one.
So it could be like a sketch version, not a sketch version, but like a lines version of Sheppy's Xavier art, and then just some key stats along the side there if I wanted.
And just says Xavier right up top. He doesn't even
I know his name. I don't need that written on top.
No, but everybody else needs to know his name.
All right, fair enough. Well, I am not prepared to make a purchase of that size right now, but it is an exciting idea to think about. But no, Perram, we're here for the news.
Oh!
In the Pathfinder news segment, we talk about all the latest happenings for the Pathfinder role-playing game, from Paizo, from third-party publishers, from licensees. Basically, if it is relevant to you as a Pathfinder enthusiast, we try and keep you informed and up to date. And we've got a lot of news items, and they are all over the place this week. The first one is massive, and that is that Paizo president Lisa Stevens has started transitioning towards her retirement and leaving Paizo as leaving a hands-on role at Paizo. This
is honestly a little bit shocking. Not that we haven't seen Lisa Stevens kind of stepping back from super, super, super active in front face of the company like she's been for a while now. I mean, we have seen her like step back a little bit, but I always thought that Lisa Stevens would just do this until they buried her because of how much she seems to love running game companies. I mean, she retired once already from all the success that she had with WotC. If you listen to some early Lisa Stevens episodes, like Paizo was started because she got bored.
So you say that you saw her with the Paizo forever, but if you've listened to enough Lisa Stevens story hours, she is a bit of a vagabond. She moves from one company to another, and it's not just like
good point.
necessarily career focus. It's just that
That's it. I saw her with Paizo forever because I just thought of Paizo as her just personal brand to do whatever she wants with. But yeah, I didn't consider the fact that she might want to go off and do her own new thing that's not associated with the rest of the baggage that Paizo has collected through its own success.
Yeah. So in her statement, she says, for the last 5 or 6 years, she has gradually given Eric Mona and Jeff Alvarez more parts of the business to run, along with more control of the decision-making process. She feels that it's time for her to formally acknowledge these changes that have been an increasing reality for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Ron Lundeen, who is one of our staff members and who works for Paizo, he, on yesterday's episode of Digital Divination, made a really interesting point when they were addressing Lisa leaving Paizo. And leaving, I think, is not an entirely accurate term. She is always going to have some kind of ownership or some kind of role in it, but it's just not going to be an active role or as active a role as she's had. So anyway, Ron is talking about how when you think of the people that really are the cornerstones of Paizo, you've got Lisa Stevens, you've got James Jacobs, Jason Bowman, Eric Mona. And we've had some significant people, members of the Paizo staff, come and go. There was that time where Wes Schneider and James Sutter left the company both fairly close together. And that was a time where it really felt like there has been a change in identity. But none of those big four have ever left the company.
Right.
And so this is going to be the single biggest change to Paizo staff as we perceive it, I think.
I mean, and this is also going to have a fundamental change in the industry. This has a huge impact industry-wide because Lisa Stevens, it was, the head of one of the most successful role-playing game companies in the world, biggest, and she's a woman, and they're now Paizo, of all the people you just listed off, she was the only woman, and I can't think of too many other, like, I know there are, but her role as being a active, successful woman in the industry was important as well, and that's going to be that's shifting the dynamic.
Now, one of the names that we mentioned that she's been gradually giving more power to is Jeff Alvarez, and unlike Lisa, Jeff's role in the company is not very fan-facing. We rarely hear from him directly. Mm-hmm. Like, we will see him at PaizoCon, but if you don't know who Jeff Alvarez is, you probably don't know him as a fan. And it's kind of similar to how Vic Wirtz is also someone who has almost as much influence over the company as Lisa does, but Lisa is the face of the pair of them. And actually, I believe in her statement, she even mentions that Vic and her are both moving towards retiring. So I have a feeling that it's not that we're going to see Jeff as much as we used to see Lisa. I think it's just going to be that we're going to see a lot more of Eric, Jason, and James.
Right. Yeah. We need to also point out that if Jeff is taking more of an official role of the business behind the scenes sort of stuff, whereas Eric Mona, as the publisher, will be making the final calls for what is actually produced and published and the creative content you're going to see. So as a fan, you're mostly going to see the Eric Mona side of that equation.
Next bit of news is also, I would say, big. Maybe not as big as Lisa Stevens planning to retire from Paizo, but Kingmaker from Owl Cat. I always have to make sure I don't say Owl City, the band. From Owl Cat Games.
I just keep calling them Owl Bear the games.
There's that too. No, it's Owl Cat. Owl Cat Games' version of Kingmaker is coming to consoles in August, which is in like 2 months.
Yeah. Sure.
So on August 18th, 2020, Pathfinder Kingmaker Definitive Edition will launch on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. The Xbox One family of devices, including Xbox One X, as well as PC. Perram, you know more about the nuances of what that statement
is. So this will be the first time that if you are playing on a console, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, or you'll be able to play the game at all. If that's your preferred format, that means that there's going to have to be a whole new interface on how the game is controlled. It'll have to be introduced. But also with what we know about the upcoming generations of consoles, you'll likely get to continue to play those on the new consoles because backwards compatibility is sort of a big thing that they have been touting. So this means that, hey, if you get Kingmaker, you're going to be able to play it on consoles for the foreseeable future. If you are a PC player, this is the definitive edition. Whatever changes that entails, this is probably means all of the DLC, which is traditionally what this entails in other definitive edition games. There will be a package available that is just, here's everything Kingmaker, all the DLC, all the add-ons, all the bonus content. Here you go, one big download.
And that includes turn-based options.
Yes.
So you can play Kingmaker turn-based right now, but it is a fan-made option.
Right.
And there is plans for War for the Crown. Nope, not War for the Crown. Wrath of the Righteous, their second PC game, that it will have turn-based options right at launch.
Mm-hmm.
Kingmaker will also now have Owlcat designed or developed. I don't know.
Well,
game term.
There's some asterisks there because Owlcat partnered with the developer of the mod to make the official version. So that mod is going to be actually in the core of what you're going to be using, both in Wrath of the Righteous and in the Definitive Edition release. So there's not going to be a huge amount of difference if you're just using the mod or using the official options from what I've seen in previews.
There, actually, the announcement even calls out the turn-based option started as a mod, and we want to say thank you to the creator of it, Hisinu.
Yeah,
so cool. They're acknowledging the mod's origins.
And I've been playing through that again with that mod, and I highly recommend it. It is so much more fun to play that game with that mod, in my opinion, than without it.
What does this mean for Pathfinder as a brand?
It means better things. This game's been more received on console. It will have more eyes on it than it would be at PC. Now, there's an asterisk there that these turn-based RPGs have traditionally been quote-unquote PC games. Though we have seen games like Divinity Original Sin and Divinity Original Sin 2 have great console success since their launches. We've seen the Baldur's Gates and Neverwinter Nights have all had recent ports over to the different consoles. So there is definitely a market for that. So this just means the concept of Pathfinder, the brand, and what it means will get more eyes that recognize it.
Yeah, if you look at the logo, Pathfinder is in big and on top. Kingmaker is secondary, even though once you play the game, you realize Kingmaker is clearly the theme of the game.
Right.
And so it clearly feels like they are building a franchise for video games, Owlcat is, and that will just enhance anyone that is looking into it and seeing that it's like, oh, Pathfinder is like Dungeons and Dragons. I've heard so much about Dungeons and Dragons now. It's really hot right now, and really start exploring what makes Pathfinder Pathfinder.
Right. And this is super important going forward with the fact that they are doing a Wrath of the Righteous next, and that's going to need as many eyes and people able to play it as possible, because video games are so much more expensive than RPGs. So much more expensive to make. A $1 million successful Kickstarter would make one heck of an RPG book, like an amazing RPG book. This would not cover the demo of a console game.
Now, Elf Tara in chat is saying it's a bit. They're a bit sad that they dropped the Switch version that was mentioned originally. Aww. How do you think Kingmaker would work on Switch?
Pretty well. Icewind Dale works fine. Neverwinter Nights works fine. The Switch is a bit tricky to program. One of the reasons it's so easy to make PS4 and Xbox One ports of PC games lately is because they're all x86 architecture. So they're using the same basic instructions. Okay, what this means is a processor has to be told how to do things. Okay? And there is languages and calls and structures on how you tell a processor to do something. And that is called its architecture. When consoles have traditionally in the past had their own custom developed CPUs that all had to be talked to in their own very specific way. Famously, this has made something like the Sega Saturn a wonderful, wonderful console had some terrible games on it, or some really, really glitchy games, because when you listen to people that have had to work on it, they tell you that it was a nightmare to program for because it used its own very special architecture. But now that all the consoles are using x86 architecture, which is the architecture that all PCs have been basically using for decades now, it makes it very easy to go from one to the other, and port your games over for a fraction of the effort and cost than it would have taken earlier.
Any other thoughts on Kingmaker coming to console?
Just yay. If you are a console player and you haven't checked out Kingmaker, and this has the turn-based mod that makes it awesomer, get it if you can afford it and are interested. It's a great game, and this is going to be, hopefully, as long as the port is good. That's one of the things that can happen with ports. Definitely wait for reviews and make sure that it's not a dumpster fire. That can happen. But assuming the port is good, get it. It's a great game.
Yeah, you are speaking to me when you say people that are more console players. I've been playing a lot more Steam games, but I've been using a Steam Link, and the main thing is that allows me to do it on my couch in my living room with a controller. And when I tried to play Kingmaker like that, and I realized it is not controller enabled,
No.
All my plans to get back into Kingmaker finally were dashed.
So that I'm really hopeful that this also means that if there is a definitive edition released for consoles, that control scheme gets back ported to the PCs, because that has been something that has happened in the past when games get console launches, is the console controls become an option for PC players to use, so that those of us that like to play on PC with controllers can do so. I'm playing through Chaos Bane right now, which is a action RPG based in the Warhammer universe with someone, and we're doing it co-op. And the second I found out that I could use the controller, I was just like, "Oh, switch!" And I just leaned back in my chair. This is so much more relaxing. I love controllers when they are the right tool for the job. Sometimes they are not, and then I like to use the correct tool. But it is definitely a more relaxing way to play a game.
Yeah, I had no plans of getting a PS4. I have an Xbox One. So all I would have to do would be buy a new version of Kingmaker when I've barely played the version that I already own. So if they do reverse port it and I'm just able to play my version with the controller, I'd be happy with that.
Yeah. And I hate to say it because I don't want it to hurt sales for this product, but there's probably a fairly high chance that, given the size, scale, and scope of this game, that it'll appear on services such as the Game Pass program that Microsoft loves. They love to find indie games of this caliber and put that in their Game Pass program, which, for those of you who don't know, you give Microsoft like a monthly fee. Right now it's like $5, and they just keep releasing games that you can just play. Right, and that includes like every Microsoft game the day it launches.
Next bit of news. This one is much smaller in magnitude, but fun. Its free RPG Day modules have been announced.
Yay!
We know that Pathfinder is getting Little Trouble in Big Absalom, written by Elnor Ferron, and Starfinder is getting Skitter Home by Jason Keeley. Free RPG Day
really
stuff has been a big part of... Actually, let's reverse that. I think that the Paizo modules have been a big part of Free RPG Day. It is one of the most consistent things that you can expect to get at Free RPG Day. Some beloved modules, all of the Weeby Goblin series has come out as free RPG Day material, and that's almost feels like a splinter of the Iconics, that the 4 lick-toed goblins that we first met in Weeby Goblins are memorable characters that are beloved, and so many people, their first experience with Pathfinder was through Weeby Goblins. And so it's just nice that this tradition has continued. I know that Free RPG Day can be a bit expensive for a lot of publishers to participate in, and for game stores as well. So for at least one reliable, high-quality product that's like, the printing quality is as high as the other modules. The art, everything that goes into the Weeby Goblins and all of the Free RPG Day modules that come out from Paizo is comparable to the things that they put out and sell. They're a little bit smaller, but otherwise, these are quality products that they're putting out, and they are great advertisements and great tools to get people into the game.
I will say yes and yes, and then
Okay.
no.
Oh,
So I love every Free RPG Day module that Paizo has ever put out. They've been fantastic.
everyone?
Hollow's Last Hope, yeah. All the Bleeby goblins, they've been of different quality of each other, but it's nice to have them exist.
What was the one that had pre-gens from the advanced class guide?
Yeah,
and the 4 pre-gens they had could not actually overcome one of the DR monster, and so it was like just TPK after TPK.
That's a thing. That was a thing. But it's a very impressive looking piece to have in your collection. The Starfinder ones have all been great. The Skitter series, I highly recommend you play. It is also a fantastic introduction to Starfinder too. The Skitter trilogy, when this comes out, is totally worth it, and they play well as. I don't know about. I haven't played Skitter Home. Okay, I haven't got to play that yet, but I have played the other 2, and they play great as a go one into the other. And it would make a great game day to play through both of those in a single game day because it's a good connecting story. Fantastic. But here's my asterisk. I'm finding there's almost more interest in these products for existing fans of the Pathfinder font, and they're less so, especially when you start getting to Weeby 5 goblins or Weeby Goblins Free or whichever name they came up with them as they kept getting further down the number line. Having sequels scares newbies, especially when that becomes like 4 and 5.
Well,
there's
that might be why they were being cagey about it, because the 4th one was Weeby 4 Goblins, and it was a prequel, and the fact that it's B4, you might not know it's the 4th in the series, and 5 was Super Goblins, and the S was a 5, so again, they were hiding the fact that these were sequels.
Right. Yeah, but they still were sequels. And
sure.
And also, I think that, again, I'm going to hold to the fact that I think more of the existing fan base was eager to get down to Free RPG Day to get their newest Paizo goodies than it was being used than was successfully introducing new players. I love the beginner box. Fantastic new product. I think that Paizo really needs a 32-page, here's how you learn to play Pathfinder without a goblin attachment to it, or I think that really needs to, like, there needs to be the super free demo version of Pathfinder produced that needs to be distributed, this sort of things, because there's the Witcher easy mode. My very first game of Dungeons and Dragons official, not my very first RPG game, but my very first time I played Dungeons and Dragons, it was through the freebie adventure rules for 2nd edition that I got off the TSR website. I think that concept of a product is so important in getting people to try your games out for the first time, and I think we're kind of missing the boat that the quote-unquote proper way to be a newbie coming into Pathfinder, even Pathfinder 2, is a $40 box set.
So, I don't know how much of this is coming from your experience on the game store side of it, or it's just your impression.
A little bit of column A and B.
Okay, so the reason I would prefer something like a Weeby Goblins book is because it is something that's exciting to a veteran Pathfinder player, and most of the time when someone gets into an RPG, they're introduced by a fan of that RPG, and so if somebody is eager to try out the new one, they are more likely to sign up specifically so that they can show up at Free RPG Day, run that for a bunch of people that are new to Pathfinder, introduce them to that module, and introduce them to the game they love, rather than 5 people stumbling through a game they've never played before because they've got access to quick start rules. And I believe a lot of those quick start rules, the experience begins and ends with that one product. Whereas I think that the more in media res style of just like, there is much more going on here. Here's something that's exciting about Pathfinder. It's not just the rules, it's everything cool about Pathfinder kind of summed up in a single module. And the fact that, like, yes, maybe it's the Pathfinder people that are going to Free RPG Day to get that book, but I think that people that go to Free RPG Day and then see the production quality of a Paizo book at Free RPG Day versus the ones that look a lot more like they were trying to cut the budget to get their products out, those books stand out. And that's another way that someone that's not maybe that's necessarily there for a Pathfinder product is still leaving with a Pathfinder product.
I'm seeing a whole lot less of those cut the budget books. I'm seeing everybody bringing their A game now. And Paizo was definitely one of the first companies to start that way, but that's not the market they're in right now. Everybody is competing for that RPG money right now. And like I've mentioned Witcher Easy Mode, that the production quality on that book is on par with anything Paizo's ever put out.
Free RPG Day this year is July 25th, 2020. Now, Perram, you may have noticed that there is a pandemic that is still going on.
I wish
but
people
there
remembered
are a lot
that.
of game stores that are opening or at least doing curbside delivery. So I honestly expected this blog post to be as much about the products as well as instructions for how people are likely to get them, because I wasn't even sure if there would be a free RPG day.
Right. I mean, I'm surprised that there is going to be a free RPG day, but at the same time, the RPG industry really needs it. They really, really need this to exist. There really needs to be some excitement right now that gets people into game stores or at least working with their game stores and picking up new product for free. Because like the conventions, man, I mean, we're doing our best making conventions fun for y'all in the virtual sense, but that's not the same experience. And this is ultimately a social game, and this is also ultimately a social experience that benefits from in-person interaction, even though the online solutions for it are wonderful and varied and unique and offer their own advanced situations. That in-person social side needs to be nurtured, and I'm just glad that this is another lifeline that's going to keep some game stores afloat.
So the game store closest to me, Gamers Cafe, which I did really enjoy the times that I've gone, are not big into RPGs. They are more of a board game store. But I do see people in chat. Elf Terra and Dragon Elvish are both from Montreal. Dragon Elvish is talking about the Dice Owl and L'Abyss, neither of which I've ever heard of. So apparently I need to familiarize myself with Montreal game stores.
Oh,
and this might be my excuse.
I have a sudden worry that is completely unfounded, but I do know that a lot of game stores are doing financially bad right now. And Free RPG Day isn't really free. This stuff costs money, and it costs the game stores a significant amount of money. And spending a significant amount of money for a product that you're going to give away is going to be a hard pill to swallow, even though the smart choice as a game store person myself who have run game stores in hard times, I've run it through hard years before, the correct choice is not to cut this sort of spending. This is the sort of spending that gets you business, but I can see how some stores would make the wrong choice or what I would perceive as the wrong choice. It might be the right choice for them, given their specific, unique situation. Oof. I can see a lot less Free RPG Day availability this year than any other year.
Especially because if a store is only doing curbside, Free RPG Day is all about getting foot traffic into the store. So other than getting people knowing what your address is, you're not going to get the same foot traffic. So I know Free RPG Day, it's supposed to be you give away the product, but if you can work out some kind of table outside the store that just has dice and accessories that people that are picking up these games are most likely to also want to pick up, find some kind of impulse buy that you can pair up with your Free RPG Day.
I can just sort of imagine them holding up like a QR code that's like, scan this to join the demo game on Roll20.
Yeah, I don't know if game stores want to encourage Roll20. Actually, this dovetails pretty nicely into the next big bit of news, and that is Origins. Origins was originally postponed to October, and the convention's original dates, which is this weekend, like the 19th, so this Friday, was being replaced with Origins Online.
Right.
Until last week, when it was canceled.
Yeah.
So that is
canceled in so many ways.
So Origins Online was it suddenly saw an influx of people that are leaving because the Gamma, which is the people that put on Origins, had not made a statement on Black Lives Matter and the protests, And so a lot of people were just taking it personally upon themselves to back out. This includes exhibitors, this includes panelists, this includes people that were helping to run the show. Now, Perram, you and I were actually helping my friend Danielle, who was with the company that was going to be running the streams for Origins Online, and her company backed out. And so it's not just like, oh, some major vendors are gone. This was a major component of what was advertised as being part of Origins Online would no longer be part of the presentation.
Yeah, I mean, to give you an idea of how sudden some of this happened, it was like I was actively messaging Danielle almost on a daily basis, helping them try to pull this off, and then I had a bad weekend where I was getting hundreds and hundreds of hate mail for reasons.
Oh yes,
for reasons, and when I finally put my head up while there was like, wait, what, canceled? Why? Why was it canceled? Oh, well, that's a good reason, but oh my gosh, we just did a lot of work for nothing.
Yeah, I first got the inkling of what was going on shortly before it was officially canceled. So either this was not happening in a space that I was monitoring, or which means Facebook, because I think this was mostly being announced on Twitter, or it just happened so quickly and built up so much steam that there was no other option but to cancel Origins Online. Now, we'll get to what that means to Pathfinder players, but an odd footnote to this is that a week later, the rescheduled date in October was also canceled. And this one, it's a little more vague about why that one was canceled. They say it's because the pandemic is likely to hit a second wave, or we might still be in the first wave, and it's not expected to die down by October. So they were cutting their losses now. But from what we've seen and what we've talked about with physical conventions being canceled, the event really needs to be told that they cannot be put it on. Otherwise, they are liable for a lot of insurance. So maybe they just happened to get word very early, or maybe they just hadn't signed contracts and it was getting to the point that they are going to sign contracts, which would make them liable. I don't know. This is just speculation on my part. The canceling of the rescheduled Origins is the stranger part of this story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Like I hate to admit that my head has been so underwater with the thousands of other things I've been involved in that a lot of this just sort of hit me by surprise and confusion because I was just not informed on some of the goings on here. After looking into it, I mean, I would have felt weird participating and helping out with what I agreed to help out with myself at that point once I found out what was going on personally with my own particular opinions and beliefs on this. So in a lot of ways, I felt like this was first majorly disappointment that the work Danielle was doing and the work I was helping her out with wasn't going to be used, but also kind of dodging a bullet.
Yeah, and actually, just to give you an idea of how quickly a lot of this came, is that we didn't announce this last episode because I don't think you'd even talked to Danielle by last episode. No. It really was sometime in the last 2 weeks, we started helping with Origins Online, and Origins Online got canceled.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that there was a little confusion about when it happened. Luckily, one of the things that has been very clear is what is happening with those organized play games for Pathfinder and Starfinder players. Tanya came out really quickly and reminded people that Origins Online hadn't actually given Paizo enough virtual tables to run all of the games that there was interest in.
It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. You have infinite virtual tables. Sorry.
And so Paizo created Concurrent, which was an online convention happening at the same time as Origins that was basically handling the overflow from Origins Online. And so when Origins Online was canceled, Concurrent already existed. All the infrastructure was already in place. And so the bullet dodged out everything that if you were only going to participate in Origins Online to play an increased number of organized play games, it's still existing. It's just on Concurrent now. There's a couple of blog posts that give you all the information you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, if as the Pathfinder player, mostly good news.
Or like
neutral news. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go play some games, gang. Oh gosh, I might get to go play some games. I might get to play
this weekend.
Yeah.
Now, this weekend is Father's Day. I don't know how that affects your availability. I know it completely scrubs mine.
Oh, I mean, there will be
You
a
have a
period
dad.
of time in which I will be with Dad doing things, but that's not going to be the entire weekend
Okay.
because I spend lots of time with Dad every week.
Next bit of news. This is not really Pathfinder related. We are the Pathfinder News Reviews and Entries podcast. It's Starfinder news, but No Direction Beyond just had their episode last week, and so they're not going to have another episode for 3 more weeks, which means that this might feel like old news by then. So I just wanted to make sure people realize that this was announced today, something that was talked about in at PaizoCon Online in the Starfinder panel, that there would be a new base class playtest. But it was talked about in such vague terms. I was under the impression it would be months before we heard more information about this.
So
Apparently, it was weeks.
So, like, they had said that, like, Origins was going to play a bigger role in Starfinder's announcement cycle, so that both Pathfinder and Starfinder weren't basically, like, competing for the same megaphones at the same conventions. That's why Starfinder season starts at Origins instead of Gen Con, whereas Pathfinder season starts at Gen Con. And ultimately, I thought that for time-based reasons, that was a good idea to sort of help, like, space out the excitement so that the thunder wasn't being eaten by one or the other. So I have every expectations that this was all supposed to be like the big Origins announcements this year, which is why we're getting them now. I imagine that going forward, we're going to need to pay attention to. We are uncertain what this means for the future of Starfinder's organization.
Now, if you had listened to the last episode of No Direction Beyond, Alex and Owen were talking about the new class, which was not in any detail announced yet. Owen had some inklings of conversations he'd had when he was with Paizo, so he didn't want to speculate. Alex was speculating that maybe it would be some kind of mech pilot. And so when I clicked on the blog post and the art is an Isoki leaning on a mech, I was like, wow, Alex was 100% right. No, ends up that there's multiple things going on in this playtest. One of them is a new class. Mm-hmm. That class is called the Nanocyte. And from the way it's described, it is a character that is just infused with nanites. And these nanites allow shape changing and transforming into tools. So at first I thought maybe it was a shape changer / Green Lantern type where you could create constructs. No, it seems it's 100% your body is becoming the tools. They are becoming the weapons. You are just, you're a science fiction shape changer.
Mm-hmm, right. I mean, it's a fun concept. They've sort of dabbled on this. I know one of my players have been like ranting about wanting this since the day Starfinder launched. So he is very happy. I let him know that this existed. He is already wanting to run character concepts by me. And it's just like, it's such a cool sci-fi concept that just, and they've already tried some of this because there's like a species in Starfinder you can play where you're just like hundreds of bugs as one bug person. So it's just fun. It's just so much fun.
The other playtest that's running, and the way it's described in the first paragraph, it's kind of interesting that it's not that it's a playtest of 2 different components. It's being described as 2 separate playtests. I guess so that there is no assumption that there's a connection between this class and the rules that they're going to be playtesting, and that is mech rules.
Finally! They said that there were going to be mech rules for Starfinder the day Starfinder launched. It was just when. And they wanted to find the right way to do it. So we have been waiting for the mech rules since the day Starfinder launched. And now we will get to play with them.
Now, if the art is anything to be believed, mechs look like they are medium-sized or slightly larger. So it's more like in Aliens, a power loader.
Don't pay attention to the artwork in this case, because that's power armor artwork for something that already exists.
Oh, it's existing.
That's something that...
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if this piece of art exists, but power armor scale robot suits exist currently in Starfinder. And that is not artwork that would represent something that cannot already be done in the game.
All right. So when you hear mechs, what size of mech are you picturing or hoping for?
Somewhere, I need something that is at least 2 stories tall. It needs to be at the smallest quote unquote mech needs to be a transformer in scale. And really, I'm thinking something more of the Gundam Battletech sized, where it's like 2-3 story tall, uses buildings for cover, but like full height cover, not dodging behind. Like, does this make sense? You would lean up against a building and you could still see your head over top of it.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I want to be able. I want to mantle over a skyscraper and then duck behind it to brace my rifle that I then shoot the giant alien robot with.
Well, then how do you feel when it says that the mech combat will still take place on the 5-foot square scale? It won't be like a Starship Combat or some new scale map.
It says that familiar tactical rules in 5-foot squares that you use in your game, we're not sure how the scale is, the rules in scale are going to ultimately play out.
Sure, yes. Yeah. I'm not saying a mech takes up a 5-foot square. I'm saying it's still on that map.
It says, so...
Is it not?
We don't know. We don't know. It says use most of, which means most of is a big asterisk to put in front of a sentence that talks about specifics. I am curious to see what this ultimately means, but yeah, it would need to be okay. So to put it into scale that Pathfinder players would know, your average Gundam, which is one of the popular mechs to compare things of, and they're the fully humanoid shape. So it's weird when you talk about BattleTech because they're walking chickens. But your average Gundam would be huge sized. So it's a 3x3 critter. So it would absolutely work on a typical flip map battle map.
We don't have an exact start date, but we are told that beginning in July 2020, these 2 Starfinder playtests will begin. I think there's more news, Perram. Hold on. Oh, yes, there's one thing. This is more than just a fun little bit of news. Hero Forge had its version 2, I forget the exact name of the Kickstarter. It had a big deal relaunch Kickstarter where color was going to be added to the 3D printing, and there was going to be a token maker, which kind of got a lot of buzz, even though every video you saw, everything like used in advertising was full color miniatures. But a lot of people were excited about the token maker. It has now gone to beta, which means that if you backed it at a certain level, you can now be making tokens. And I can tell you from our Discord, which is now full of these tokens that are just being made. First of all, I can tell you that there's a lot of people that have backed at that level. But second of all, these tokens are really cool. Like the backgrounds and the borders and the angles that you can capture with this tool is really exciting.
When they first announced this as a feature, I kind of laughed to myself and dismissed it instantly. I was like, how difficult is it to take a screenshot and throw it into Token Tool? I mean, like, this doesn't, like, the idea that this was a paid feature of any sort made me giggle. But now to see that, like, some of the effects that they've put forth, at least the little bit of extra effort that shows that this isn't quite as easy as copy paste into Token Tool.
Yeah, because I have used Token Tool. I've made my own tokens. It's pretty straightforward. And yet these tokens that I'm seeing other people make are exciting.
Yeah, they're really nice. Especially the sci-fi ones with like the laser grids over top of everything.
It's also really smart for Hero Forge to do that because like so many people are using the Hero Forge build a mini tool to create a screenshot and make a token, and Hero Forge gets no money for that. There's no advertisement on the site. There's nothing they get other than maybe somebody saying, I made this figure in Hero Forge. So for it to now be something that they acknowledge they are now actively getting into the virtual tabletop space, that means that that's a direction the company could grow towards.
Right. It's also an interesting time period. Like the concept of them charging money for this feature, I am actually conflicted on a lot of reasons because it's such a basic... Well, artists should be rewarded for their work, but at the same time, a lot of Hero Forge's current costs and practices are... they're able to get away with only because they have a near monopoly in the market and an emergent market. And I see that a lot of this is going to change the second that there's some competition of legitimate strength of competing against them. And at the same time, they put out a very good product that the cost isn't so much that I object to. It's not like, I'm not saying evil Hero Forge. It's just like there's a lot of complexities, and I highly suspect that the second that there's some legitimate competition on the market for Hero Forge, there is like Desktop Hero, but I love Desktop Hero. It's a great product. You should go check it out, but it is not on par with Hero Forge. But the second there is some real competition, we're going to see some drastic announcements in their pricing structure and the organization, I'm sure.
So I think one of the reasons there isn't that competition is because Hero Forge is savvy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is a good product, but it also smartly marketed. And so, like, they have been dropping prices for people just buying the 3D files. They added this when they saw that that's what people are using the tool for. Like, they are aware of what their product is doing, what people use their product for, and how they can turn that into money. Because if they're not making money, they're just giving stuff away. They're giving away their time, and they can't keep the lights on.
Oh yeah, artists needs to be paid. It is how those artists are paid and how things are charged and how artists need to be paid. Also, consumers need to not be taken advantage of.
But marketing isn't evil. And the reason that a lot of artists aren't getting paid is because they aren't savvy business people.
Right.
I think Hero Forge is a good balance of both. They're not taking advantage of people.
Right, yeah.
Ready to wrap things up?
I am.
We'll be right back with the also oversized shoutout section right after this.
When am I going to sleep?
Wrap-ups and shoutouts. Wrap-ups and shoutouts. Wrap-ups. Wrap-ups and shoutouts.
And we're back. Oh, wrong button. Now we're back.
Thank you for joining us for No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder News Reviews and Interviews podcast. Thank you to Logan Bonner for joining us for the discussion, the breakdown, the review of Bestiary 2, a book that I was far more excited about after having read it than I thought I would be going into it. Before we wrap things up, there are some things we want to bring your attention to, the first of which is Battle of the Pantheons. We've talked about this quite a bit recently. This is a fun project that Dustin Knight, No Direction staff member, brought to us and collaborated with Paizo on. And I'm sure he is in chat right now, chomping at the bit that we did not mention this in the news section, but we were saving it for shoutouts. We are finally at the voting stage of it. If you go to the Paizo blog from a couple of days ago, Battle of the Pantheons voting is open. What you are able to do is read the, was it 4 or 5 finalists? Let me double check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, the 4 finalists. Read them over, see which one is Pantheon that you want to see added to Pathfinder Society as a legal option, intrigues you the most, is best written, the circumstances on which you vote for it, what word am I looking for, Perram? The reason you are voting. All right. The reason you vote is up to you.
Right.
Just look over the 4 different options, see which one just makes you happiest.
Yeah.
Vote for it right there on the blog.
Also, it's ranked choice voting, so you don't have, if you're torn between 2 you really love, you can rank 1 as 1, 1 as 2. Yeah, you get to decide 1, 2, 3, 4 where they rank, and that's how the voting will be calculated.
It's really bugging me that I cannot figure out the word that I want to use.
Motivation?
No, it's a little more technical than motivation. But anyway. Battle of the Pantheons. It's cool to have been participated in this because we were some of the people that narrowed down the original selection to a top 20, I believe, which were sent to Paizo. Paizo narrowed it down to less than 4. And then we got one final say in which ones we thought should be the finalists. And now it's up to you. It's completely out of our hands as the judges from the earlier rounds. The final people who will decide which of these is becoming a Pathfinder Society legal option and is added to the Pathfinder canon is you.
Go forth and vote. Speaking of voting,
the criteria for what you vote for.
Speaking of voting for official Pathfinder contests that we're participating in, I am participating in the RPG Superstar judging as run by Roll for Combat in conjunction with Paizo. And it is monster focused. The deadline to submit your critter is in just 2 days as of this recording, June 19th. If you haven't got your critter in, go get your critter in. It is a fairly well done website. It's actually fairly easy to build a critter there. Go submit your monster. There's lots of cool prizes. There's going to be a published book of the winners. It's a fun project. You all need to go check it out. And and get. And also remember, RPG Superstar has been a humongous important part of Paizo's community for basically since the beginning.
I also want to point out the blog that's on rpgsuperstar.com is full of great advice, including an article written by Owen Casey Stevens from the No Direction Network and many other things that you would know Owen for. The Making an Awesome Monster blog really is good food for thought. So if you only have a couple of days left and you're like, I have a vague idea of what my monster should be, but I don't know how to deliver on it. Well, first of all, there was the advice that we got from Logan earlier in this episode. And then there are the blog posts about, they're basically all about making monsters cool.
Right. And also we want as many people submitting cool monsters for this as possible because cool monsters are awesome. And I want more cool monsters to use in my games.
And sorry, did you mention the prizes?
Oh gosh, there are like a bunch of prizes. It's like $20,000 total of prizes. Like first place gets a whole bunch of money. It's a lot of money, and placement inside of a published bestiary.
Yeah, Roll for Combat's going to be publishing the Battle Zoo Bestiary, and they're also giving out money. They're giving out T-shirts with the artwork for the monster you submit based on how high you qualify. There is grand prize, platinum, gold, silver, and copper. And like copper is the lowest of the winners, and there's still 56 winners at that level. So you have a good chance of winning. And so there's nothing stopping you. It's free to enter. It's just take a little time if you have ever dreamed about seeing your monster published, even if you don't want a career as a designer. If you're just like, what would be a cool monster? I was trying to remember what that random word that Owen threw out earlier, and I forgot. The Flargle, I don't know. Submit that.
Gosh.
It only takes a little bit of time.
Oh my gosh, their submissions are going to be flooded with that now. Maybe not that monster, gang. Maybe not that monster specifically.
No, but like that monster's hench creature.
Oh my gosh. Hench creatures need to exist now.
Absolutely. Everyone needs a hench creature. There we go. The Fergal Black's Bloodglug. Thank you, Sheppy. Ooh, Kitsune Warlock's just throwing out Shark Shasa. That's cool.
Backwards fins.
Next up, we've got, I guess, 3 shout-outs that are all kind of tied together. So this was Logan's shout-out earlier, but the Humble Bundle called I want to get the official name, the Fight for Racial Justice. If you go to humblebundle.com, it's one of the first ones on the front page. You can get over $1,200 worth of games, comics, and books for under $30. That doesn't feel right. Oh, right. Sorry. $30 is the text. I paid Canadian. That's why I had to submit $43.
Also, there are some fantastic games in this bundle, and I want to call out some of them to motivate you all to get them. First, Baba Is You. If you've not played this game at all, you owe it to yourself to play this game. And it is a fantastic puzzle game that will remake how you think of puzzle games. Hyperlight Drifter is fantastic. Spelunky, I've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours playing. It is.
Oh, I didn't notice Spelunky.
Spelunky's on here.
Videos about this.
Armello is one of my favorite online board games to play with friends, and it takes very little to motivate me to join an Armello game. If you're on Discord, that's a hint. Overlord 2 is fantastic. Kingdom is fantastic. I mean, gosh, there's so much here. Knights of the Pen and Paper 2, if as role-playing fans, is one of the best in-joke games I've ever seen managed to be put together. Elite Dangerous is the most immersive sci-fi sim I've ever been a part of. It is the reason I bought a virtual reality headset, not vice versa. And there's Darkest Dungeons in here. There's, of course, Starfinder. Attack on Titan is in here. I mean, good
Are you telling me you're not familiar with No Time to Explain?
I am very familiar with No Time to Explain.
Okay.
It's just not one of my favorites, but I'm
glad
really?
to
hear that it's one of yours.
It's a fun curiosity. Like, you can play it 10, 20 times in a row, and each time is a new experience. And it's multiplayer.
Oh, Endless Space Collection's in here. I didn't notice that. One of the best 4X strategy games going.
And you mentioned it really quickly. Yeah, the Starfinder core rulebook, which I was surprised to find I don't have a PDF of. So I either never got a Humble Bundle that had it, although I thought I got most of the Paizo partnered Humble Bundles, or it just hasn't been in it. No, that's not possible. There has to have been the Starfinder core rulebook before now.
There has been several times, actually.
Then did I just never?
There is like a giant list of Humble keys that I've just never bothered to turn in.
Yeah, I guess I've gotten this so many times that I assumed I'd already turned in the key, and this is the first time I actually did it.
All right.
Anyway, so it's $43 if you're Canadian. You know, as of today, I don't know if this fluctuates based on the current exchange rate, but it's $30 US for $1,200 worth of stuff, which might remind you of another not a Humble Bundle, but a charity bundle for racial justice and equity that came out recently. That had like a $5 buy-in to get almost $10,000.
1,700 games.
A baffling number of games. Now, you are no longer able to donate to that charity. That charity is closed. But if you are one of the many people who did, because they raised millions of dollars, there is a great tool that was shared in our Discord by Discord member Sang. It is a filter for all of those games. You are able to filter out physical versus video games. You're able to filter out all the non-games. You're able to sort it by the date that it was added. You're able to sort it by popularity, by the Steam rating. So if you're like, great, I've got all of these choices, what do I do? Use this tool at randombundlegame.com/browse. It has the entire selection of 1,741 items that you got in that bundle.
Oh my goodness.
And several ways that you can filter it. Oh, there's a show more filter button. Oh,
so wow, we have to filter the filter.
Filters.
Huh? Oh goodness.
Yeah, so the main filter was a drop menu, but there's also a text-based filter. Oh, cool. I just want to play around with this tool and try and find the most specific game for what I'm feeling like at the moment.
Oh, correction. Alex Chevalier says the Darkest Dungeon is the DLC, not the base game. Well, that's unfortunate. That's a very fun game.
Oh. All right, finally, we have two more bundles. These are the NAACP. I don't know why I always put the C right at the beginning. NAACP Legal Defense Fund bundles. There are two of them on DriveThruRPG right now. They are $10 each. One of them gets you almost $500 worth of PDF products, all RPG. One of them gets you slightly more than $500. So for $20, you are getting over $1,000 of RPG PDFs, and all proceeds are going to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund.
Yeah.
I probably should have said this earlier, but finally, I've been given podcast shout-outs lately. And the next one on my list is the Judge John Hodgman podcast. If you are familiar with John Hodgman, comedian, he has been a correspondent on The Daily Show. He played PC in the Mac versus PC ads. He's probably shown up in at least one of your favorite sitcoms. One of his favorite things to do is just talk to people. And in the Judge John Hodgman podcast, people submit issues that they and a friend are having. And he's the judge. People have to present their evidence. Some of them are, is a hot dog a sandwich? Is a machine gun a robot? These were some of the early ones. Some of them get a little more personal. Like there was a family that had an avocado tree in their backyard, and the dog was allowed to go out and do its business in the backyard. And they were worried, or one of the two people, the plaintiff was worried that by eating those avocados, they might be exposing themselves to the dog's waste. Whereas the other one just thought it was fine if you rinse it off. And it was up to Judge John Hodgman to hear their case and decide who is the right person. And he actually gets them to swear, like, my ruling is final. Please actually accept my ruling and my judgment. It's really just, if you just like people, it's almost like people watching the podcast. Mm-hmm. So you really get real insight into who these people are. And you get a lot of insight into who John Hodgman is and what his priorities are. There's also friendly banter between him and his bailiff, Jesse Thorne, who is on, he's on several other Maximum Fun podcasts. He might be one of the people that runs Maximum Fun. Mm-hmm. Fun fact is that Glenn Shackleton, who is one of the Ontario venture captains, was on. He runs a Ghost Walk business, and one of his employees was upset that every time that they went out for lunch, he chose Subways because there's so many other restaurants. Maybe better. That's up to you to judge. But the fact that he was so loyal to Subway was bothering her, and she just wanted more options. And so that was the case that they presented to Judge John Hodgman. And Glenn's a funny guy, and he's got a fascinating career. So if you're looking for one episode just to see what this show is about, track that one down.
I want to, as an anecdote, I want to say that I had a boss that was a very good boss. I was very fond of working for this man. I won't name his name for privacy.
Was it John Hodgman?
It was not John Hodgman. Though he did once buy me a Dinobot collection just because he thought that I needed a Dinobot collection.
Very cool.
And he would make a habit of taking the team out to lunch and paying for it. It was, and when you're getting lunch bought for you, you don't complain. But it was always Chinese buffet. 5 days a week for 2 years.
Wow. So that's a lot of free lunches and a lot of Chinese buffet.
Yeah. So there was about another year and a half afterwards that I would not eat Chinese ever again. Now I love Chinese and I will eat it frequently, but I had to let that cool down go off.
Perram, where can people find out more about us?
Why, you can find out more of this content and other fantastic Starfinder, Pathfinder, and general geekery content at nodirectionpodcast.com. And while you're there, check out the Discord link on the right-hand side of the page, where you will be able to join the chillest community to talk about these games and other such interests with the entire No Direction community that happened to also click that link, as well as most of the No Direction personalities. We love to hang out there and interact with the fans all day, every day. While you're also there, you can find us at No Direction Podcast, Facebook.com/No Direction, YouTube.com/No Direction Show, Twitter.com/No Direction. You can also find us. That's everything, isn't it? No! This show and other shows are only possible thanks to the support we have received on Patreon. We would very much like to thank our patrons for supporting us and helping us put this together and to continue to grow the network into the rich tapestry of Pathfinder, Starfinder, and geeky content that is put out on a daily basis at nodirectionpodcast.com. If you want to join our patrons, we would appreciate it. And you can do so by clicking on the Patreon link over on nodirectionpodcast.com or going to patreon.com/nodirection.
I do want to give a couple of specific things. Actually, I'm probably going to make a habit of just calling out one or two cool things from the site's content every episode. That we need to be shouting out to our own content as well. The PaizoCon online convention coverage ends on Sunday with the so right now the last ones that are coming out this week are a 2-part on play-by-post and another one it's another one of the third-party ones, and I don't have it memorized, but I do have it in front of me. If I scroll fast enough, I bet I can find it.
I mean,
eventually
you can.
A 2-part one on methods for fast combat, and then a seminar recording of play-by-post 101. And then finally on Sunday, we have the closing ceremonies. And wow, that's it for our PaizoCon coverage. It went by really quickly. Vanessa Hoskins did an amazing job of assembling them, editing them, putting them together, and scheduling them.
And lots of and putting those cards together in lickety split fashion too. I know that takes a long time.
The cards are a pain in the butt. The descriptions are a pain in the butt, and we talked about it with V on the pre-show for the last adventures that we recorded. But she did a lot of the stuff that we find the most annoying things was really just assembly line for her, and she handled it no problem. Oh, Alex Shiver in chat says froghemoth miniature? ?
I mean, yeah, Ryan's getting one, everyone. You don't have to keep pestering me about it.
What do you mean, everyone? It's Alex Shiver every single time.
Okay.
Yeah, but I as someone who reads and listens to basically everything that we put out, I am kind of marveled at the quality of the stuff that the Direction Network puts out. I was talking to John Godak, who is going into surgery today, or he went into surgery. I haven't heard an update from him about how that's going, but all the best of luck to him. And yeah, he randomly referenced one of his presenting interviews, which I had listened to and immediately had a feeling on. And he's like, I'm amazed that you listen to it all. And honestly, like I literally told Luis and Lauren to make a podcast because I wanted that podcast to exist.
Mhm.
So like the No Direction Network is just full of stuff that I think is fun stuff to listen to, fun stuff to read about.
My
And
favorite
we've got
stuff is
an
the stuff
amazing
I'm
staff.
not doing, because I get to hear the stuff I talked about or or recorded. It's stuff like Lauren and D and sorry, I almost said D&D. And it's stuff like Lauren's podcast and DD and Intrepid Adventures, the stuff that I'm not actively participating in that I enjoy listening to because it's new to me.
And so one article I want to bring specific attention to because it is relevant to what we were talking about today, and that is the latest Fox's Cunning. So Dustin has started a series where he is going through all of the monsters that you can summon with the various summon spells. Today, he made a list of all of the animals you can summon with Summon Monster, every heightened version of it. And not only did he list them, he ranked them, or he gave them a star rating, and he gave you a description of why he gave it that rating, his criteria for that rating, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And he linked it to the Archives of Nethys. So it's an extremely useful tool that I think people should be bookmarking. People should keep in mind, especially if you're going to be playing a conjurer character in the game.
Yeah, Dustin, I'm going to be making a animal stick based on your thing, and according to Ryan, it's not actually a stick.
It is not a stick.
It is stick.
The stick is a lie. Yeah?
It's a
What's
stick.
sticky about it?
Huh? Well, I mean, the tape is definitely sticky on it because you have to use that to hold it together. But no, it's long and stick shaped, and it will have useful animal info on it.
It's not a stick. Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.